Chapter 1651, Prior to the negotiations, 5, Changyangba and Bayuntian both became stunned. They stared at Shengguan Mu'er in a daze. At that moment, they found that their minds had stopped working. The island mistress of Three Saint Islands' name was thunderous to their ears. Back when Jian Chen was in seclusion, and the Origin Realm experts of the two worlds were negotiating, the Origin Realm experts that belonged to the Tianyuan continent side were absolutely filled with fear. In order to avoid any conflict with the foreign Origin Realm experts, they had set the location of negotiations to the City Lord's estate in Flame City. This was an indication to just how pressured the Origin Realm experts of this world felt when the Origin Realm experts of the other world remained here. During the negotiations, the Origin Realm experts on the Tianyuan continent side could see the fear for the island mistress of Three Saint Island from the foreign Origin Realm experts, which allowed them to understand that the foreigners would not speak brazenly or try to intimidate them during the negotiations. This was not because of Flame City but because of the island mistress of Three Saint Island. After all, Flame City would only stop Xiongzhong's group from fighting and destroying the place. If the outcome displeased them, they could have used threats or even just intimidate the representatives of this world. There was no need for them to act so politely and fearful. The true deterrence was the island mistress of Three Saint Island. Although Changyangba and Bayuntian never took part in the negotiations, they knew a lot of the details due to their unique identity. As a result, the couple felt respect from the bottom of their hearts for the island mistress of Three Saint Island. Even though she was not as powerful as their son, her existence was enough to deter all the Origin Realm experts from the foreign world aside from the Spirit King. Yet in that moment, the island mistress who they respected so much was actually calling them mother and father. It was just too shocking, shaking the depths of their old souls. Why, you're actually the child's mother? Changyangba only recovered after quite a long while. He immediately stared at Shengguan Mu'er with shock and disbelief plastered across his face. He would have never even dreamt of something like this. The female sovereign who he respected so much was actually his daughter-in-law. Shengguan Mu'er glanced at Shengguan Aojian and nodded gently as she saw how shocked the old couple had become. Changyangba immediately gasped after receiving her confirmation. His heart beat extremely heavily at that moment. As a matter of fact, his heart had never beaten so quickly. They felt even more shocked now than they felt when they learned that their son was no weaker than the Spirit King. So you're actually my grandson. Tears pooled in Bayuntian's eyes emotionally as she looked at Shengguan Aojian benevolently. She could not help but clench the pouch of fragrance that Shengguan Aojian had initially gifted to her tightly. Shengguan Aojian had personally made this pouch of fragrance. He had used large quantities of precious heavenly resources. The value of the heavenly resources was enough to shock countless people. Only now did Bayuntian learn that the pouch of fragrance was actually a gift from her own grandson, so her value of the pouch of fragrance soared several times over. There was obviously no longer a need to keep Shengguan Mu'er and Shengguan Aojian's other identity a secret. Very soon, this stunning piece of news spread across the entire Changyang clan, shocking them all. The most shocked person was Changyang Ku. He could only sigh emotionally inside. Soon afterwards, the news spread across the entire Tianyuan continent like wildfire. It had even spread across the three other races, surprising everyone in the world. Countless people sighed in amazement. In Flame City, a young girl passed through the bustling streets with a young boy, constantly moving from shop to shop. Whenever she saw something that caught her eye, she would buy it without any hesitation no matter the price. She was so extravagant that the descendants of many large and luxurious clans could not help but sigh. The two people who seemed like siblings were two of the three Origin Realm experts who guarded Flame City, Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling. However, they had currently changed their appearances, so only those who knew their behavior and habits very well could recognize them. Conversations about Shengguan Aojian and Shengguan Mu'er's other identity were littered across the city. Obviously, the two of them had heard about it as well. The young island master of 3 Saint Island is actually Big Brother's son, Xiao Ling murmured. She thought a little before saying to Xiao Jin, "Brother Xiao Jin, let's go to the Changyang clan." "All right then, sister Xiao Ling," Xiao Jin sighed a little. He was completely helpless. As a spirit of the attributes, his body grew very slowly, but his mind was unlike Xiao Ling's, permanently unable to grow. As a result, although Xiao Jin seemed like a young boy, he was already as mature as an adult. However, no matter how mature he was, Xiao Ling always treated him as her young brother, pulling him everywhere. At the same time, a young man sat in the forbidden grounds of the city lord's estate, cultivating there. Dense origin energy circulated around him and a tremendous pressure would radiate from him from time to time. The young man was the white tiger in human form. Unlike Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling, he worked extremely arduously on his cultivation. He did not spend a single moment on pointless things. He basically spent his entire time cultivating, apart from spending some time with his mother. He would not pause unless something major occurred. At this moment, the white tiger's eyes snapped open. At the moment he did that, the space before him shattered, being reduced to void. Just his gaze alone had surpassed the limits of the space in his surroundings. Compared to the past, his strength had clearly increased. The young island master of 3 Saint Island is actually my elder brother's son. I need to go congratulate him now that this has been announced, the white tiger murmured. He soon vanished. Tai Ta currently sat on the throne in the War God Hall. He radiated with a dense, golden light. The light permeated the entire Divine Hall as if it had fused with the Golden Divine Hall. Over 20 Saint Emperor Hall elders sat below the throne. Every single one had their eyes closed, they were also cultivating, absorbing a tiny portion of the golden light from Tai Ta. Suddenly, Tai Ta's eyes snapped open. The dense, golden light around him gradually dispersed as well before vanishing completely. The entire Divine Hall returned to its previous state. The hall elders beneath the throne all stopped cultivating at the same time. They opened their eyes and looked at Tai Ta politely. "Prepare rich gifts. I'm going to the Changyang clan." Tai Ta chuckled aloud and stood up, passing down orders. "Yes, sir. I'll go prepare them immediately," a hall elder immediately replied and left politely. Chapter 1652, Gathering of the Strongest, 1. At the same time, the sea goddess, Yang Lai, Gui Haidao, Feng Xiaotian, Houston, and the 4 brothers all hurried over as well, gathering at the Changyang clan. They all congratulated Jian Chen. Although Jian Chen did not plan anything special to celebrate, announcing Shengguan Aojian's identity as Jian Chen's son was akin to returning to the ancestral home according to the customs on the Tianyuan continent. Even ordinary people would celebrate something like that, not to mention that this had happened with Jian Chen and Shengguan Mu'er, 2 sovereigns of the world. As a result, many ancestors from large clans and organizations came without invitations from across the world with rich gifts. Even the patriarch of the Tianqin clan, Qin Shao, matriarch of the Tianmu clan, Tianmu Ling, king of the Qinhuang kingdom, Qin Ji, Quan Yukai, Kara Liwei, the president and the grand elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union had come. Many people who were acquainted with Jian Chen had all come. In the end, Changyang Ba and Bai Yuntian could only decline Jian Chen's request of not celebrating the matter. They ordered a large banquet to welcome the guests. Everyone dispersed after the celebrations, but the 4 brothers remained. Jian Chen knew what the 4 brothers were looking for. After greeting them, he took them out of the Changyang clan and directly led them to the center of a desolate mountain range. There were a few magical beasts living in the mountains, but they were not particularly powerful. The strongest was only at the 6th class, so the powerful presence that the 4 brothers unconsciously radiated immediately scared these magical beasts away when they arrived. Jian Chen extended his right hand and a finger-sized tower suddenly appeared. Sword slashes covered the tower and each slash shone brightly. It formed a powerful sealing force, keeping the two sealed. This tower was the treasure from a higher world that Jian Chen had found in the Sea of Despair, the Inata Grand Prime's Inata Tower. The four brothers immediately stared at the tower when it appeared. They were interested as well as confused. This was because the four of them felt a sense of familiarity and unfamiliarity from the tower. The reason why you've come to find me is probably because of this tower, right? Jian Chen stared at the four brothers and said calmly. The four brothers said nothing. Their attention was completely devoted to the Inata Tower. They were drawn in by it. With a single movement from Jian Chen, the Inata Tower in his hand was thrown into the air. Then, under Jian Chen's control, the tower rapidly expanded in the air, becoming something several thousand meters wide, reaching into the clouds in the blink of an eye. Boom! The Inata Tower struck the ground heavily after expanding. With a heavy rumble, the entire ground shook. The tower's weight immediately took over after leaving Jian Chen's hand, and it rapidly sunk into the ground. Jian Chen shook his head rather helplessly as he watched the Inata Tower sink a few dozen meters into the ground. He had not fully refined the Inata Tower yet, so it was a problem every time he placed it down. The tower was as light as a feather in his hand, but all of its weight would come crashing down once it left his hand. As a result, he needed to expand the tower. The bigger it was, the better, as a greater surface area could support the tower's weight. Otherwise, the tower might end up falling to the core of the planet if it remained as the size of a finger. Come in with me. Jian Chen waved at the four brothers before flying through the damaged door of the tower. The four brothers glanced at the damaged tower that reached into the clouds in shock before flying in with Jian Chen. There were a total of 9 floors in the Inata Tower. Parts of all 9 floors had shattered, with huge strands of sword qi hovering at the edges of the 4 different directions, suppressing the floor. Jian Chen took the 4 brothers to the sword qi in the east of the first floor. He stared at the huge sword qi and said, "You should be drawn towards the Inata Tower. The reason all lies with these sword qi. The master of these sword qi is called the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, a supreme expert who has reached the very apex of another world. I do not know where your cultivation method comes from, but it's definitely related to the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. He might have even created it. However, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt left behind all the sword qi inside and outside the Inata Tower, so they share the same origins as you. And maybe because of this, you are drawn towards here. The Nirvanic Immortal Exalt has a total of 4 divine swords, which are the Sword of Mortality, Sword of Reincarnation, Sword of Slaughter, and Sword of Severance. The 4 swords just happen to share some physical features of the swords in your hands. The reason why you could all break through to the origin realm during the battle should be connected to the sword qi the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt left behind. When I subdued this tower previously, 4 strands of sword qi assisted me. They were hidden in my hand, and during your battle against the crisis of the world, the 4 sword qi flew out of my hand out of their own will. They fused with you, which is why the 4 of you could break through together at that time, Jian Chen explained to the 4 brothers. Jian Chen, is the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt a person of a higher world? Ada asked. Jian Chen nodded, yes, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt is a person from a higher world, but he does not belong to the saints' world. Instead, he is from the Immortals' world, a world which opposes the saints' world, as well as the greatest expert of the Immortals' world. His strength is beyond our imagination. Jian Chen sighed at the sky when he reached this point and said regretfully, unfortunately, his glory has become a matter of the past because he has fallen long ago. He died on the battlefield between the 2 worlds. Hearing that the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt was already dead, the 4 brothers' feelings became mixed. They had learnt the origins of their cultivation method, but the original progenitor was unfortunately already dead. What you see right now is the sword chi from the Sword of Severance. If you look at your sword, it's rather similar to the Sword of Severance. I want to see if you can form a connection with the sword chi. If you can absorb the sword chi, it would be even better. Jian Chen stared at Ada in interest as he became slightly eager. Aside from answering the four brothers' questions, he had brought the four of them into the Anata Tower for this reason. He wanted to see if he could make the four of them remove the sword chi. All these sword chi were sealed, sealing up the Anata Tower's power. If the seals were not removed, he would be unable to display the Anata Tower's full strength even if he refined it completely. Ada stared at the sword chi for a while before shaking his head. I find these sword chi both familiar and unfamiliar. Absorbing them is completely impossible because I can clearly feel their strength. Even with me just standing here right now, my heart still beats in fear. If I try to absorb it, I'll be ripped to shreds in a single moment, and I'll die. Jian Chen became disappointed, but he did not become dejected. He brought the four of them to the second sword chi. The second sword chi was left behind by the Sword of Slaughter, corresponding to Air's sword. However, it was no different from Ada. Air also sensed some familiarity from the sword chi, but he was still unable to absorb the sword chi. Jian Chen took the four brothers to all four corners of the first floor, but they found nothing in the end. He directly took them to the 9th floor and visited the four sword chi there as well before leaving in disappointment. They exited the Anata Tower. Then what about the sword chi outside? Can you control it or absorb it? Jian Chen stood outside and stared at the sword slashes on the tower. Even though he already knew the outcome, he still wanted to try it. The four brothers stared at the sword chi and closed their eyes very soon. Their presences changed abruptly at that moment as well. Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed. Currently, he could sense that the four brothers seemed to have fused with the sword chi. They're borrowing the sword slashes to comprehend the way of the sword. A thought crossed Jian Chen's head. The same thing had happened with him when he first saw the sword slashes, but he had failed since his realm of comprehension was just too low. Not only did he fail to benefit at all, he had almost suffered an intense backlash. The cultivation method of the four brothers should be left behind by the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. They share the same origins as the sword chi. I wonder if they can comprehend it successfully, Jian Chen thought. However, just when he thought of something like that, the four brothers' presence immediately became a mess. They all vomited blood and became extremely pale. Jian Chen arrived before the four of them. Raising his hand, he used Radiant Saint Force to heal them. The four of them had suffered from a backlash. Fortunately, they were not too heavily injured. With his abilities as a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master, they made a full recovery before long. What powerful sword chi! I've never sensed such powerful sword chi. I never thought that I wouldn't even have the right to comprehend it after reaching the Origin Realm. Ada sighed deeply as he glanced at the sword slashes with lingering fear. However, he immediately looked away again, no longer willing to try comprehend it anymore. Jian Chen stared at the sword slashes. He did not tell them that the sword chi had actually become much weaker than before after conflicting with the Anata Tower for so long. Afterwards, the four of them walked around the tower a few times. The four brothers had also flown to the very top of the tower. They saw the four slashes which were missing sword chi, but they did not benefit from anything at all in the end. Jian Chen, you've already answered our queries. If there is anything the four of us can assist you with in the future, please let us know. We will do everything we can as long as it's within our abilities. Farewell. The four brothers clasped their hands at Jian Chen and left together. Chapter 1653, Gathering of the Strongest, 2. Jian Chen watched the four brothers leave. When they finally left his sight, he sighed gently. There was a hint of pity and disappointment on his face. Aside from answering the questions that the four brothers had, he had another intention, he wanted to let the four of them enter the Inata Tower. He wanted to see if the four of them could somehow remove the seal on the Inata Tower. After all, the cultivation methods of the four brothers were related to the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, and they had only managed to reach the origin realm through the assistance of the four strands of sword chi. In this world, the four of them were the only people who were related to the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, so Jian Chen believed that the four of them would have the greatest possibility in removing the seal on the tower. Although the seal on the tower had become far weaker after so many years, it was still a seal left behind by the greatest expert of the immortals world. Even after it had weakened, it would not be something that Jian Chen could remove. He would still remain helpless against the seal even if his strength progressed by a few more layers. Jian Chen looked at the damaged tower and stared at the sword slashes. He murmured, "These sword chi have already developed some intelligence. They must have sensed the brothers' arrival. Maybe they didn't react because the four brothers were too weak. After all, they still haven't comprehended the way of the sword. If the four brothers comprehend the way of the sword and come here after their strength has progressed by quite a few cultivation realms, will the outcome be different?" Jian Chen pondered as he stared at the sword slashes on the tower. After a while of thought, he put the Inata Tower away. With a single movement, he disappeared from the location as well, leaving behind only a huge pit the Inata Tower created. Jian Chen passed the next few years peacefully and simply. He either spent his time by his parents' side or guided Shengguan Aojian through cultivation. He also passed on all the experiences he had gathered across the years to Shengguan Aojian. Sometimes, he would stay on Three Saint Island for some time, accompanying Shengguan Mu'er. He would also visit Longevity Valley from time to time, following Uncle Xiao into the fields to do some farming in coarse clothes and bare feet, living an ordinary person's life. He would also visit various places to see acquaintances and friends. This period of time was the easiest and most pleasing time in Jian Chen's life. There was no longer any need for him to be like before, devoting himself to cultivation every moment of the day while remaining wary against enemies, living under huge pressures, where he could potentially become eternally doomed from even the slightest carelessness. In the past, Jian Chen had never even considered such a simple and peaceful life. Now that he could finally spend his days as he wished after so much trouble, Jian Chen valued it extremely dearly. He valued every day, every minute, and every second of it. He would often smile, revealing a sense of being relaxed, which he had never shown before. Through the years, quite a few changes happened to his good friends and acquaintances. The third prince of the Qinhuang kingdom, Qin Ji, had become the king quite a few years ago, while Tianmu Ling had become the matriarch of the Tianmu clan as well. Qin Shao had become the patriarch of the Tianqin clan long ago, and he even had several grandchildren now. Under his lead, the Tianqin clan became the greatest clan in the Zhuya kingdom. It was so prestigious that even the royal family of the kingdom was not as great. Although there had not been many major changes with the Radiant Saint Master Union, the president announced his retirement a few days after Shengguan Aojian's identity was announced. The new president was Quan Yukai. The Grand Elder had retired as well. The two of them had become Class 8 Radiant Saint Masters in the artifact space several decades ago, so they now possessed lifespans of 6,000 years. In their remaining time, they planned on stepping down completely and living a hermit lifestyle, no longer interfering with the matters of the Union. Due to the lack of Saint King ancestors, the Tsar family that once controlled the City of God had completely declined now. Although their ancestor Tsar Kaiyun had become a Saint Emperor, she left the clan as well, no longer bothering with the matters relating to the clan. She had faded away from the Tian Yuan continent. Changyang Hu remained in the Pure Heart Pavilion to cultivate the entire time. Due to the personal guidance of Feng Xiaotian, he seemed to have severed his emotions and desires completely. He had abandoned kinship and friendship. He had never taken a single step away from the Pure Heart Pavilion after entering it, and he did not even visit his mother who was growing weak across the years. Meanwhile, Nubes was probably the happiest one out of everyone. He spent his time traveling around with 2 women, moving through the territories of all 4 races. Sometimes, he would find a cave and go at it with the 2 women. The 2 women were both Class 7 magical beasts who had assumed human forms. They were burly, broad-shouldered, and powerful, even greater than many of the large men on the Tian Yuan continent. Xiao Tianyu, Dugufeng, Yunzheng, Seniorin, Sans, and so on basically spent all their time in Flame City, devoting themselves to the development of the Flame Mercenaries. A year after Shengguan Aojian's identity was revealed, Yu Yu and Huang Luan both emerged from seclusion. Their feelings became extremely mixed and they saw Shengguan Aojian. In the blink of an eye, the 10 years that Jian Chen and the Spirit King had agreed on arrived quietly. As soon as it was time, an extremely powerful presence began to radiate from the tunnel connecting the 2 worlds. A simple-looking middle-aged man appeared. Behind him was a metal sword that hovered with a dark glow. It radiated with soaring sword chi. The sword chi was so powerful that it made space distort. If it were not for the fact that the sword chi was purposefully hidden, it would have been enough to annihilate most of the space in the world. This middle-aged man was the Spirit King. He had punctually appeared on the Tian Yuan continent. Behind him were the Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints. Shen Jian, please come to the City Lord's estate in Flame City. Jian Chen's voice rang out from 1,000,000 kilometers away as soon as the Spirit King appeared. It crossed the distance and boomed thunderously at the location of the tunnel between the 2 worlds. The Spirit King's face did not change, nor did he say anything. He directly took a step and with that, he vanished. At the next moment, he had crossed the distance, appearing in the City Lord's estate as if he had teleported. He stood before Jian Chen. Between the 2 of them was a long discussion table. All the Origin Realm experts of the Tian Yuan continent's world had already been seated and had been waiting for some time already. The Spirit King observed the composed Jian Chen closely. After staring for a while, he said, "Your strength has increased again?" Jian Chen smiled, "There was some increase during my period of secluded cultivation." The Spirit King sat down and became rather stern. Jian Chen's strength before was roughly the same as his. Now that his strength had increased once again during his secluded cultivation, would that mean that the difference between the 2 of them had shrunken again? Or maybe they were completely on the same level now. At the same time, the Spirit King was unable to sense just how much Jian Chen's strength had increased. However, he could tell from his battle prowess that Jian Chen might have completely exceeded him already. Chapter 1654, Unification. Even with his mental fortitude, the Spirit King could not help but gasp when he confirmed the matter. Jian Chen's growth rate had completely shocked him. In a lower world where origin energy was thin, advancing any further after breaking through to the origin realm would be extremely difficult. It would require several times more energy and time. In fact, the laws of the lower world even restrict people from reaching godhood. Due to Jian Chen's cultivation method, the Spirit King was previously unable to tell his exact cultivation level, but he could roughly feel that even if he had not reached peak reciprocity, he was not far from it. Any advance in strength at that level was almost impossible because the lower world rarely had the resources to support the cultivation of a reciprocity expert. Despite the limitations, Jian Chen had made quite some progress in just 2 decades. The Spirit King could not help but sigh in surprise from this fellow's speed and talent. As the Spirit King sat down, the other Origin Realm experts all arrived at the City Lord's estate as well. They all glanced at Jian Chen with reverence and various other complicated emotions before silently sitting beside the Spirit King. The Spirit King was not present in the negotiations before, so Xiongzhong had represented the world of Forsaken Saints as he had been the strongest present. Xiongzhong had decided everything, but now that the Spirit King was personally present, the protectors and elders who were great enough to be revered on the Tian Yuan continent all shut up obediently. let's talk about the matter of land. As mentioned in the previous negotiations, our world has already proposed the land we want, and its size is proportional to the territories between the four races. We want a quarter of the Tian Yuan continent, Sea Realm, Beast God continent, and Wasteland continent. That way, the land we possess in this world will be the same as yours. What do you think? The Spirit King said calmly as he stared at Jian Chen with interest. He directly ignored the other Origin Realm experts who sat beside Jian Chen. Everyone understood that there would only be two people taking part in the negotiations this time. They would be Jian Che and the Spirit King. The other Origin Realm experts had no right to interfere. In a world where strength reigned supreme, the person who could hit harder would always be right. If this world did not have Jian Chen to rival the Spirit King, the problem of negotiations would not exist at all. Jian Chen shook his head gently in response to the Spirit King's words. Shun Jian, I won't agree to that. Then why don't you tell me what you're thinking? The Spirit King's face remained the same and he responded easily as if he had expected Jian Chen to put up a fight. The Spirit King added, in order to stop the crisis of the world, my world has made a huge sacrifice, paying a great price. If the matter of land cannot be settled peacefully through negotiations, I cannot guarantee you that our world will not resort to military action. The Spirit King's words contained a hint of threat. If the land they were offered did not satisfy them, the world of Forsaken Saints would go back to war. The expressions of many of the Origin Realm experts on Jian Chen's side changed slightly. Their world no longer feared a battle against the world of Forsaken Saints with their current strength, but it would be destructive if a battle did erupt. The Tian Yuan continent, which had already cracked into 4 pieces, might be reduced to nothing. After all, the shockwaves of battles between Origin Realm experts were enough to cause a devastating effect on the world. In the past, Jian Chen and the Spirit King's battle in outer space had forcefully split the moon in half. Even now, when night descended, countless people would see the two halves of the shattered moon. None of them wished for the planet beneath their feet to become a second moon. On the other hand, the Origin Realm experts of the world of Forsaken Saints felt prideful because of the Spirit King's awe. They even straightened their backs unconsciously. Due to the fear they felt toward Shengwan Mu'er, they did everything fearfully in the negotiations before, always at the end of their wits. All of them felt extreme indignation because of that. Now that the Spirit King was personally conducting the negotiations, they immediately regained their awe from before. The Spirit King's threat did not anger Jian Che at all because the current world of Forsaken Saints no longer possessed the strength to challenge the Tian Yuan continent. Once battle erupted, the world of Forsaken Saints would definitely suffer defeat because his chaotic body had reached the 9th layer. Even with the crack in his chaotic Niden, which limited him to 80% of his power, just that was far greater than what he had been able to use with the 8th layer. Correct. Your world indeed played a vital role in averting the crisis of the world. If it weren't for your assistance, we would probably all be dead by now. When your cultivators offered up their lives, I promised them that I'd fulfill their final wish so that they can rest peacefully in the afterlife, Jian Chen said calmly. At the same time, a scroll appeared in his hand, which he spread out on the table. On it was all the territories across the 4 races. Jian Chen stared at the map for a while and said, if I directly give you a piece of land, it'll lead to the objection of many people who originally lived there. After all, their land is their roots as well as the ancestral homes of many people. It holds an extraordinary significance to them, even more important than their lives. They would rather die than leave. There have even been many clans, organizations, and countries that have banded together because of this. If you want to settle down in that land, they'll throw themselves at you without any fear for death. As a result, several billions of people in my world will lose their lives in battles to protect their homeland if I directly follow through with your suggestion. I definitely cannot allow that to happen. The Spirit King frowned and asked, then what do you plan on doing? Jian Chen knocked the table with a knuckle and said after some thought, I have indeed come up with an idea to deal with this problem, and that is to unite the two worlds, abandon the concept of territory in different races to formally become one. Uniting the two worlds, the Spirit King murmured softly. He was surprised. Jian Chen's proposal had completely exceeded his expectations. After all, they were people from two different worlds and worlds that had initially gone to war with each other. There would still be some hostility between the two worlds. In fact, the Tianyuan continent had even been shattered because of their conflict. Correct. Unification. Our world will not give you any land. If you want your own land, then use the corresponding wealth to exchange it with people. Although wealth is nothing in our eyes, there are still quite a lot of people who would be willing to sell their land in the world, Jian Chen said sternly. This was the only idea he could come up with that could fulfill the demands of the world of Forsaken Saints as well as maintain the interests of his own world. After all, in the mortal world, wealth could be described as universal. Buying land would obviously not be a problem, and through this method, the world of Forsaken Saints would definitely be able to obtain some land or even more than what they had initially planned on getting. The light in the Spirit King's eyes flickered. He found Jian Chen's suggestion to be rather enticing. Although it would mean that they would need to lose some things in order to get land, their world had existed for countless years and it followed a monarchy system. Just the amount of wealth paid as taxes was an astronomical figure, so the Sacred Spirit Hall had accumulated a huge amount of wealth long ago. Losing some of their resources would not affect them at all. At the same time, they could use those resources to buy land from the various people across the four races, so the final amount of land they could end up with would be far greater than what they could ever negotiate for, assuming the negotiations even went their way in the first place. Splitting up the land had a direct connection to the lives of several billion people, so the Spirit King understood that if he continued to insist on dividing up territories, it would be unlikely to proceed smoothly. Jian Chen would never make the decision to take the lives of several billion people. As a result, the unification of the two worlds, which would allow the world of Forsaken Saints to buy land, seemed to be the only valid method so far to both solve the problem of land and the lives of several billion people. Chapter 1655, A New Era, 1. The Spirit King sank into his thoughts over Jian Chen's suggestion of unifying the two worlds and gaining land through purchase, clearly weighing the advantages and disadvantages of the suggestion. He would discuss with the elders and protectors around him from time to time through communication techniques. For the moment, the city lord's estate became silent. No one spoke on Jian Chen's side. Jian Chen had already presented his exact idea. They only needed to wait for the world of Forsaken Saints' response on whether they agreed or not. This matter clearly was extremely important, enough to influence the world of Forsaken Saints far and wide. As a result, the Spirit King and the others dared not to be careless. They all seemed to be sitting there silently, but they had engaged in discussion long ago. Time passed silently until 4 entire hours had passed. Only then did the Spirit King respond. He said, "All right, I agree to it. Our worlds will be unified from now onwards, and we can buy any land in your world." The Origin Realm experts on Jian Chen's side all began to smile as if a heavy load had been lifted from their shoulders when they heard the Spirit King's response. The matter of land had weighed on their hearts for 2 decades, and they knew that as long as the matter was not properly settled, it was possible for war to break out between the two worlds. They did not fear it, but they did not wish to see it either. Now that the matter of land had reached a perfect conclusion, many of them let out a breath of relief. Jian Chen also smiled. He said sincerely, "I hope that our worlds can coexist peacefully in the future. Of course, I must remind you that we won't do anything if you buy land fairly, where how much you can obtain will depend on your abilities, but I do not wish to see you force people into selling. If that happens, we will interfere. There will be some conflicts between the unification of our worlds. If we don't manage it well, it might even erupt into war, and the shockwaves of the battle will be extremely destructive to the Tianyuan continent once Saint Emperors get involved. The Tianyuan continent has already shattered now, becoming extremely weak. It won't be able to endure much at all, so I'd advise some Origin Realm experts of both worlds to form an alliance to prevent this so that they can specially manage this matter and prevent Saint Emperors from taking part in large-scale battles, Houston suggested. Jian Chen nodded slightly. That's not a bad suggestion. I feel the need to form an alliance to prevent large wars between experts. After all, the Tianyuan continent will not just be our homeland in the future. It'll be yours as well. None of us would wish to see our homeland destroyed at our own hands in the end. Okay, I agree, said the Spirit King. Afterwards, the two sides ironed out some details regarding the unification of the two worlds. They both considered that unification would not be an easy matter as they were people from two separate worlds. Hence, they set down many rules and restrictions to avoid large-scale conflict between the two worlds. At the same time, they formally established an alliance between the two worlds. The name of the alliance was the Tian Saints Alliance, taking from the name of the Tianyuan continent and the world of Forsaken Saints. There was no alliance head, only alliance elders. Without any exceptions, the Origin Realm experts of the two worlds would take up those positions. The alliance only existed to prevent large-scale conflict between the cultivators of the two worlds and prevent the shockwaves of battle from destroying their homeland. The alliance would not interfere in anything else other. With the negotiations concluded, everyone dispersed. The details of the negotiations were announced as soon as possible. Very soon, everyone learned about the conclusion of the negotiations between the two worlds. Some people treated it like it was nothing, while others sank deep into their thoughts about the future developments of this world. At the same time, there were other people who began to weep in joy as they cheered jubilantly. They were the people who were prepared to guard their homeland, kingdom, ancestral home, or clan to the death. They originally planned to enter a battle to the death against the foreign world, to protect what belonged to them. However, when they learnt about the conclusion, they all became emotional. Many people began to cry uncontrollably. It's Sovereign Jian Chen. It's Sovereign Jian Chen who helped us. If it were not for Sovereign Jian Chen, who stood against our land being handed over, where we are standing now would probably already belong to the foreign world. On the other hand, all of us, people deeply attached to the land, would end up dead on the battle against the world of Forsaken Saints. Thank you, Sovereign Jian Chen. Thank you. Long live Sovereign Jian Chen. The other sovereigns of our world don't really care about our lives, but Sovereign Jian Chen does. He was the one who saved us. It was he who protected our ancestral land. Very soon, some people learnt that the final changes in the decision to hand over land were completely due to Jian Chen. They immediately began to cheer Jian Chen's name gratefully. Jian Chen had protected their homes and their lives. At that moment, several billion people across the world silently remembered Jian Chen. There were even a few cities where people began to erect statues of Jian Chen. People would kneel before the statues every day, and there were even many families who hung up images of Jian Chen on their walls to worship. As the greatest sovereign in the world, he was supreme. However, he was not like the other sovereigns who paid no attention to the lives of those who lived at the bottom of society. He thought for them and spoke for them. He had protected their homes, their ancestral lands, and even their lives. On the other hand, Jian Chen appeared on Three Saint Island. He sat on a rock at the top of Three Saint Mountain. Shangguan Mu'er was sitting beside him, playing her zither. The music she created was beautiful and touching, enough to enchant people. Jian Chen would remain there for the next period of time to quietly overwatch the developments of uniting the two worlds and see if there would be anything he had not accounted for. The world of Forsaken Saints moved quickly once the negotiations concluded. The next day, a large number of sainthood experts emerged from the tunnel that connected the two worlds. They entered the Tianyuan continent before dispersing in all directions, flying towards the territories of the four races. These people were all saint kings and saint emperors. They were the people the world of forsaken saints sent to buy land. They all possessed a large amount of wealth. Of course, since they came from the world of forsaken saints, they did not need to worry about being robbed even with so much treasure because there were origin realm experts from their world who watched over everything. Chapter 1656, A New Era, 2. In quite a large, bustling city, the lofty city lord laid back in the air as he watched a performance. Suddenly, a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance appeared before him and directly said, "I want to buy this city." The city lord leapt in fright with the sudden appearance of a person. He became stunned when he heard the person's words, and he only responded after quite a while with much uncertainty, "Are you from the world of forsaken saints?" The middle-aged man smiled and introduced himself, "I am Stark. I come from the world of forsaken saints, and I am a sixth heavenly layer Saint King." "What? Yes, Saint King." The city lord scrambled to his feet and became rather pale. He was only a heaven saint master right now, but he was also the strongest expert in the city. Saint Kings were insurmountable existences in his eyes. "I want to buy this city. You can go sort it out with the people in the city. Whether it be money, battle skills, or cultivation methods, they're all things I can offer. I'll pay according to the territory size of each person. Of course, there'll be something in for it for you if you satisfy me as well," said Stark. But this city is the territory of the Luofei kingdom. "How can I?" the city lord said as he appeared to be troubled. He was rather reluctant to help the people from the foreign world. After all, he was a human, so how could he help a foreign race? However, the person standing before him was a saint king, so even though he was reluctant, he was not bold enough to directly show it. "The Luofei kingdom you speak of only has a single saint ruler. If you end up contributing enough, I can ask the higher-ups to let you into the sacred grounds of our world of forsaken saints to cultivate. You'll definitely be able to become a saint ruler within a decade," said Stark. "What? I can become a saint ruler within 10 years? Is that true?" The city lord's eyes widened as he became emotional. He became a heaven saint master many years ago, but it would be almost impossible for him to reach sainthood in his lifetime with his limited talent. Sainthood was a fatal attraction to him. "Of course. How precious do you think our sacred lands are? Making people reach saint ruler is only a simple matter," Stark guaranteed. "All right, I agree. Senior, as long as I can become a saint ruler, I'll do whatever you ask me to," the city lord agreed excitedly. He had completely forgotten about any matter regarding the fact that they were of a different race now that the hope of reaching sainthood was presented before him. Very few people knew that there was an ancient clan of several tens of thousands of years old hidden within an ancient mountain range. Today, the ancient clan had received a special guest. This guest seemed like nothing special, but he managed to enter the clan silently, ignoring any and all defensive measures. The guest stood before the ancestor of the ancient clan and said emotionlessly, "You have an underlying illness that prevents you from reaching Saint Emperor for the rest of your life. I just happen to have the cure for it, and I can make you become a Saint Emperor in 100 years as well as give you the power to increase your clan by 10 Saint Kings. I can let you choose the 10 people, and I'll make them all become Saint Kings within a century. What you have to do is just move out of this mountain range. This mountain range will belong to us in the future." A light flickered through the eyes of the ancestor. He said with a gruff voice, "You're able to infiltrate here silently, and I can't tell what your strength is. If I'm right, you should be a Saint Emperor from the world of forsaken saints. Your conditions are indeed enticing. I might have already agreed if you were a human, but it's a pity that you aren't. It's impossible for you to get us to move out of here. Don't you have enemies? I'll be honest, but we're looking for a lot of land, and there'll be a lot of people who will benefit from us. They'll either obtain the cultivation methods or battle skills they want or have their strength increased dramatically with our assistance. I can't guarantee whether your enemies will become even more powerful, the foreign Saint Emperor said calmly. The face of the ancestor of the ancient clan changed, and his gaze began to waver. I'll give you 3 days to consider it. I will be back after 3 days. Similar occurrences did not just happen on the Tianyuan continent. It occurred in the Sea Realm and with the magical beasts quite a lot as well. Not only did the people from the world of Forsaken Saints lay their hands on the cities of mortals, but they also targeted a few hermit or even ancient clans. They approached them through various ways and used various methods to tempt them for their land. The appearance of a saint-tier battle skill was enough for ancient clans to go to war with one another. The world of Forsaken Saints had such a great heritage that the saint-tier battle skills that were priceless in the eyes of the Tianyuan continent cultivators were nothing to them. As a result, on just the first day, many hermit clans chose to sell their land for a saint-tier battle skill, a saint-tier cultivation method, or the opportunity to become a saint king or even a saint emperor. They made this decision so that their clans could become even more glorious and greater. Their entire clans moved. At the same time, the people from the foreign world used money and other treasures to buy large quantities of land from mortals. They had even offered a few benefits to the kings of kingdoms, winning over the kingdoms themselves. As a result, the territories of entire kingdoms had basically become their backyard. Of course, the foreign people did not run amok on the land that they had bought. They only wanted territory so that they could provide their weaker clansmen with a better living environment. After all, the environment in the world of Forsaken Saints was just too horrible, completely unsuitable for mortal realm cultivators to inhabit. Countless people would die from natural disasters every day, so the other world seemed like heaven. Jian Chen and Shengguan Mu'er sat on the same rock on Three Saint Island. They were both observing everything unfolding in the world, whether it be on the Tianyuan continent, Beast God continent, Wasteland continent, or in the Sea Realm. It has only been the first day, and the foreign world has already obtained so much land. If this continues, they'll probably be able to buy more than half of the Tianyuan continent. Jian Chen, have you made any countermeasures in regards to this? Shengguan Mu'er looked at Jian Chen. Jian Chen nodded, I have indeed made countermeasures. The world of Forsaken Saints will only be able to obtain a limited amount of our land through their various measures because I've already secretly ordered many of the large clans and sects in this world to reject their offers of selling over their land. Jian Chen paused before continuing, and the origin realm experts of the world of Forsaken Saints aren't stupid. They know that once they buy up more land than we can afford to sell, we'll end up rebounding with full force. They know when to stop. After all, we agreed to them buying our land not because of how powerful they are but because of their contributions to stopping the crisis of the world. They completely understand this. Chapter 1657, Tai Ta bids farewell. Not only were Jian Chen and Shengguan Mu'er observing the sainthood experts from the world of Forsaken Saints as they bought land recklessly, but the other origin realm experts in the world were also secretly watching over these experts from the foreign world as well. Their souls were expanded across the territories of the four races as they paid close attention to the foreign experts, preventing them from going overboard. Only Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling paid no attention to the entire matter, running around every day as they played. Even the White Tiger, who had been cultivating like a madman, would expand his soul from time to time and observe everything outside. At the same time, the origin realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints were also secretly observing the clansmen who had come to buy land. After all, every single one of them bore an extremely significant amount of wealth for purchasing land. Not only did they carry the money used in the world, but they also carried a large number of cultivation resources, cultivation methods, battle skills, and so on. The Sacred Spirit Hall had accumulated all of these treasures across the years. Even though it all amounted to only the tip of the iceberg of the Sacred Spirit Hall, it was still enough for Saint Emperors to go crazy over it. Hence, to ensure their safety and to make sure their treasures were not stolen, the Origin Realm experts watched over everything at all times. As long as the disparity in strength was not sufficiently wide, the Origin Realm experts of both worlds would be able to sense each other's souls. As they expanded their souls so often, the Origin Realm experts that belonged to the world of the Tianyuan continent would often come into contact with the extended souls of the Origin Realm experts, but nothing adverse happened. The reckless purchasing of land had caused quite a tremendous uproar in the world of the Tianyuan continent. They all offered large amounts of treasures and cultivation methods to purchase land, causing the value of Saint-tier battle skills and cultivation methods to plummet. Basically every ancient clan and organization with Saint Kings who agreed to move received a Saint-tier battle skill or a Saint-tier cultivation method. After all, Saint-tier battle skills were precious due to their shortage. Even many ancient clans that had existed for tens of thousand years did not possess one. With the entry of the world of Forsaken Saints, the influx of Saint-tier battle skills and cultivation methods immediately caused these items to lose their former value. The foreign world's use of wealth on mortals and cultivation resources when dealing with cultivators was truly an effective method of obtaining large plots of land. The resources they consumed through this trade would be utterly insignificant to the sacred spirit hall that had existed for countless years. This consumption was insignificant because not only did the world of Forsaken Saints possess more Origin Realm experts than the Tianyuan continent's world, even their sainthood experts had exceeded Jian Chen's world in number. As a result, there were basically countless Saint-tier battle skills and cultivation methods. In the blink of an eye, the world of Forsaken Saints' large-scale purchasing of land had gone on for 3 whole years. Not only did the world of Forsaken Saints gain quite a large section of territory among the 4 races, the strength of Jian Chen's world had rapidly increased in those 3 years as well. The world of Forsaken Saints had brought with them many heavenly resources that had never appeared on the Tianyuan continent, as well as scrolls that contained the comprehension of the mysteries of the world, which would assist people in reaching sainthood. As a result, many Heaven Saint Masters managed to reach Saint Ruler. However, the people who reached sainthood through the use of heavenly resources would never be able to advance any further in cultivation. Only the small portion of people who broke through using the scrolls of comprehension and their own hard work could progress further. These heavenly resources were not as perfect as the violet cloud peaches and possessed backlashes. Once someone reached sainthood through the use of these heavenly resources, their foundation would be wholly destroyed, restricting them to that cultivation level for the rest of their lives. However, there were still many peak Heaven Saint Masters who chose to break through to sainthood with this destructive method, as their talent limited them to the 6th cycle of Heaven Saint Master. They would be reduced to a skeleton in 1,000 years' time at most if they did not make this choice. Forsaken Saints rapidly entered the world through the tunnel during these 3 years, to the point where their population stretched into the hundreds of millions. These people were not powerful, mostly below Earth Saint Masters. Earth Saint Masters and Heaven Saint Masters only represented a tiny portion of them. They settled down on the land the world of Forsaken Saints owned. They cultivated there, established families and businesses there, attempting to unite with the people of this world. With their existence, the world gained a new race, the Forsaken Saints. The people from the world of Forsaken Saints always called themselves Forsaken Saints. Many of them did not know where the name came from, let alone what it truly meant. After all, the name had been around for just too long, so long that even past spirit kings were unable to research the subject. It was like a brand, burnt deeply into the depths of their minds, such that they would always remember that they were Forsaken Saints. After moving to the Tianyuan continent's world, the first friends that the Forsaken Saints made were merchants. In the eyes of the merchants, there were no eternal enemies, only eternal profit. They saw the arrival of the foreign race as a great opportunity, so many of the merchants imported the local specialties of certain regions as well as what the Forsaken Saints lacked. They benefited tremendously. Merchants became the first friends of the Forsaken Saints as well as the most welcoming group. Of course, there would be a few cultivators who were journeying through the continents who would end up in some small-scale conflicts and fights against the Forsaken Saints. However, the upper echelon of the Tian-Yuan continent did not interfere with these matters. After all, every single expert had grown up in a sea of blood and corpses. This would only be training for them. A small fishing boat was anchored silently several dozen kilometers away from Three Saint Island, rising and falling with the waves. Two young men of similar ages stood on the boat in coarse clothes, their feet were bare and they were fishing. Beside them was a basket that contained several large fish squirming about. It would splash water on the two young men from time to time, soaking their clothes, but they did not seem to mind at all. They stared out at the sea as they conversed with great interest. "Father, what do you think we should eat tonight? Do you want to eat Mother's fish soup or roast fish?" "I like the taste of roast fish more," one of the young men said with a smile. He seemed content. "Your mother's fish soup isn't bad. Your second aunt's fried fish is pretty good as well, while your third aunt's roasted fish is delicious. Why don't we try them all tonight? We've caught so many fish anyway," said the other young man. To no surprise, there were two swords on his back, one azure, and one violet. The two of them were Jian Chen and Shangguan Aojian. At this moment, the space next to Jian Chen rippled, and a burly man suddenly appeared by his side as if he had teleported. The burly man's skin was lustrous as if he was plated in gold. He wore an attire for battle with a cape, making him seem dignified. He naturally radiated with an aura of supremacy. The most eye-catching part was the golden imprint of an axe between his eyebrows. "Tai Ta, you've come at a perfect time. Why don't you come back to Three Saint Island with me to try the fish? It must have been several decades since you've tried something like that. It'll be nostalgic," Jian Chen said to the burly man who had suddenly appeared. Tai Ta looked at the fishing duo, and his gaze became mixed with feelings. There was a strong sense of a reluctance to part with them. After a moment of silence, he sat down beside Jian Chen and stared off into the sea. He said, "Jian Chen, I've come this time to bid farewell to you. I am leaving." Jian Chen's grip on his fishing rod immediately tightened when he heard that. He only responded after some silence, "Have you really thought it through? Once you leave, it won't be very easy for you to return. Who knows how long you'll have to wait for? Senior Adriana has already made all the preparations. She is urging me to go to the higher world. I've already thought it through. I will leave soon because I don't want to stay here either." "There's no point in staying here anymore," Tai Ta said rather gloomily. Jian Chen glanced at Tai Ta deeply before sighing. He knew part of Tai Ta's reason. Originally, Tai Ta had been engaged to a woman in the tiny village he had grown up in on the Tian-Yuan continent. However, the woman had been married off to another man in the village many years ago, and she had become a grandmother now. Tai Ta's heart had always ached because of this matter. Tai Ta had always kept this matter hidden and did not tell anyone. However, with Jian Chen's tremendous strength now, his soul could easily envelop the entire world. If he was willing, he could make anything happen in the world, so what happened in Tai Ta's village obviously could not be kept a secret from him. Jian Chen patted Tai Ta's shoulder, "You have to protect yourself once you go to the saint's world. We might meet there before long." Jian Chen did not try to persuade Tai Ta to stay. He knew that Tai Ta would depart sooner or later. Tai Ta looked at Jian Chen and said, "Jian Chen, come to the saint's world with me. Senior Adriana has told me that I'd become the ruler in the eyes of everyone once I return to the God clan. Everyone will respect me and listen to my commands. The God clan is a glorious clan in the world of Forsaken Saints. They're very powerful, so if you go to the saint's world with me, you'll be able to remain in the clan to cultivate. With my status in the God clan, no one will be able to make any trouble for you." Shangguan Aojian was immediately displeased when he heard Tai Ta's words. He grumbled, "Uncle Tai Ta, I won't stop you if you want to go to the saint's world, but don't entice my father, or I'll never forgive you." Tai Ta looked at Shengguan Aojian, and his gaze became gentle. He smiled without minding too much. "Your father is going to leave sooner or later, and it won't just be your father, but your mother as well, because it'll be almost impossible for their strength to progress if they remain here." Chapter 1658, Doubts about Jian Chen's identity. Shengguan Aojian snorted gently and turned around, no longer paying any more attention to Tai Ta. He knew that his parents would leave this world sooner or later, and that day was approaching. "Tai Ta, there are still a lot of things tying me down here. I want to stay a little longer in this world so that I can spend some more time with my parents before I leave. After all, who knows how long I'll be gone for. I don't even know if I'll be able to see the two of them when I do come back," Jian Chen said with a rather heavy heart, because he had no idea whether he could return after going to the saints' world. He was not afraid of dying. However, he was still tied down. Even if he had to go, he could not leave in such a hurry. "Okay, I'll wait for you in the saints' world. Directly go to the God Swirl Plane as soon as you get to the saints' world." "I have no idea where the God Swirl Plane is, I just heard it from Senior Adriana. Senior Adriana told me that our God clan is located on the God Swirl Plane, and as long as you make it there, you can find where the God clan is by asking anyone," Tai Ta said sincerely. "Alright, I'll come looking for you on the God Swirl Plane if I get the chance." Jian Chen paused with that and became stern. "But Tai Ta, I hope you can promise me something. Please do not tell anyone in the God clan about me. The more powerful they are and the more authority they possess, the more you cannot speak of me. Okay?" "Why?" Tai Ta asked in confusion. Jian Chen paused for a short moment before responding, "Don't ask me now. Anyway, just don't mention my existence randomly in the God clan. Please do not mention the two swords I possess to the upper echelon of your God clan in particular, and it's best if you keep it a secret from people who aren't a part of the God clan as well. You'll learn the reason in the future." Tai Ta understood the significance of the matter when he saw Jian Chen's seriousness. He immediately nodded solemnly and guaranteed, "Okay, I agree. I won't speak of it randomly. I don't know the reason, but I believe you because you are my best brother." Jian Chen sighed gently and pulled back his rod. He pulled out a 60 centimeters in length fish out of the water. Jian Chen removed the fish from the hook before throwing it into the basket, and Ming Dong. Ming Dong was sent to the saints' world several years ago. With his strength back then, it definitely would have been challenging for him to survive in the saints' world. His life will be in danger if he shows any carelessness at all. It has been so many years, and I wonder how he has been. I worry about him the most. Tai Ta, since you have the God clan in the saints' world, I hope you can look for him using the God clan once you go to the saints' world if you can." Jian Chen became worried when he mentioned Ming Dong. However, he still had some hope that Ming Dong had not been stranded in some place and the Anata Grand Prime's organization had protected him instead. After all, Ming Dong had been sent away by one of the Anata Grand Prime's treasures, the Fortune Jade Pedestal, in the heavenly palace of Bisheng. The matter would surely involve the Anata Grand Prime. It might have even been a way for the Anata Grand Prime to choose a successor. If that were the case, Ming Dong's safety would have been guaranteed, but if it were not, it would be a horrible situation for Ming Dong to be stranded in a higher world. "Don't worry. The matter has always been weighing on my mind. Ming Dong is also my friend, so I'll immediately get people to look for Ming Dong once I get back to the God clan," Tai Ta slapped his chest and guaranteed. Tai Ta and Jian Chen spoke for a very long time, only leaving when they knew it had become late. This was because both of them understood that this would be the last time they met in this world. Next time, they would see each other in the saints' world. With Tai Ta's departure, Jian Chen and Shengguan Aojian returned to Three Saint Island. Jian Chen's heart felt rather heavy. First, Ming Dong had been sucked away, then his sister was taken away without him even getting the chance to bid farewell. Now, Tai Ta was about to leave as well. He would lose one more close friend. Aside from this, what bothered Jian Chen the most was the identities of Tai Ta and himself. He was a successor of the Immortals world, a disciple of the Sword sect of Violet Heavens. This was an unshakable fact. Ever since he cultivated the Azulate Sword's law, ever since he cultivated the chaotic body, ever since the Sword spirits took him as his master, his identity had changed. Meanwhile, Tai Ta was a part of the God clan from the Saints' world. The Saints' world and Immortals' world were hostile towards one another, so he really did not know whether his relationship with Tai Ta would remain the same once his identity was revealed. Aside from Tai Ta, there was also his sister Changyang Mingyue who worried for him and protected him since their youth. Jian Chen felt that a huge boulder was weighing on his heart when he thought of these matters. He felt nervous from how suffocating it felt. Internally, he was even slightly afraid of facing all this. In the War God Hall, Tai Ta sat on the throne boldly. His face was calm, but his eyes shone coldly and vigorously. He seemed dignified. The current him was no longer the country bumpkin who was just born yesterday. Tai Ta had truly matured in the past few decades, whether it be his temperament or personality. Jian Chen asked me to keep the matters about him a secret from the upper echelon of the God clan, in particular, his two swords. I can't even mention it to outsiders. Why did he ask for something like that? Is there a secret that needs to be hidden? Tai Ta thought about what Jian Chen had told him and became curious. Jian Chen doesn't want me to reveal this to other people. That means that it'll threaten his life if I do. Jian Chen is my best friend, and I won't allow anyone to harm him, even if it's the upper echelon of the God clan, Tai Ta murmured gently. Towards the end, his bright eyes shone with two rays of light. But if I want to protect Jian Chen, I have to know what he's fearing and deal with the source of the problem. But from Jian Chen's words, everything seems to be related to the two swords. After a moment of silence, Tai Ta stood up. He took a step and suddenly vanished from the divine hall. The elven god tree reached into the clouds within the forbidden ground of the elves. It radiated with a tremendous presence of life. The forbidden grounds were quiet, without anyone to be seen. Only the elven queen had the right to enter and leave as she pleased. Even the elven elders could not set foot in here so easily. At this moment, there was suddenly a flash of golden light. A figure had appeared silently before the elven god tree. He was several meters tall and extremely burly, while his skin was golden. He wore a cape and naturally radiated with a sense of supremacy. Adriana greets the war god. Before the elven god tree, an illusionary woman appeared. She bowed towards Tai Ta, who had suddenly appeared. Adriana, I want to ask you if you recognized the two swords used by my brother Jian Chen, Tai Ta questioned. After a moment of hesitation, she shook her head and said, War God, I do not recognize the two swords. However, the two swords are violet and azure and their sword chi are unique. They do resemble a set of legendary treasures. What treasures? Tai Ta's eyes narrowed, and he continued his questioning. He already realized that he might be able to find out what Jian Chen feared from Adriana. Adriana recalled the past and said, they're supreme treasures of the Immortals world, the Azulate swords, also known as the twin swords of Yin and Yang. They are one of the 10 great god artifacts of the Immortals world. They are the sect treasures of the Sword sect of Violet Heavens, the chief sect of the 9 great sects in the Immortals world. It's said that the founding ancestor of the sect, Violet Heaven's Immortal Exalt, personally forged the two swords. The Violet Heaven's Immortal Exalt is a peak expert from the Immortals world, one of their 5 grand exalts. Adriana's expression suddenly became rather complicated, and she said hesitantly, except that we're enemies with the Immortals world. If Jian Chen's swords are the twin swords, then, if they are, then what? Tai Ta asked in a deep voice. If they are, Jian Chen definitely won't be able to keep them, but that's given that he doesn't have any ties to the immortals world. If he does, he'll become the public enemy of the saints' world and might even be hunted down by several grand primes. It's just that right now, Jian Chen's swords only resemble the twin swords from the immortals world. After all, their difference in power is just too extravagant, replied Adriana. Chapter 1659, Tai Ta's departure. Tai Ta fell silent. He did not delve into the matter of the immortals world. Right now, all he was thinking about was Jian Chen. Everything that Jian Chen had said to him earlier and his stern expression clearly appeared in his head. If Tai Ta were the same country bumpkin from several decades ago, he would have never thought so much. However, he had truly matured after he became the war god of the 100 races and reached the origin realm. After learning all this from Adriana and connecting it to what Jian Chen had told him before, he was basically certain that Jian Chen was related to the immortals world. He did not know whether Jian Chen's swords were the azulate swords from the immortals world, but he knew there was a connection between the two. A while later, Tai Ta suddenly stared at Adriana sternly and said with a heavy voice, "Adriana, Jian Chen is my best brother. It doesn't matter whether he has any connections to the immortals world, but you cannot reveal anything regarding him, especially in regards to his two swords. Even if the upper echelon of the God clan asks you, you cannot speak of it. Do you understand?" Although Adriana was the greatest God King of the God clan, Tai Ta had basically directly ordered her right now. He seemed dignified and possessed an undefiable sense of power. "Yes, sir," Adriana replied politely. Not only was she completely fine with Tai Ta's words, but she also behaved like the situation was natural. As a member of the God clan, Adriana deeply understood just how revered the war god was in the God clan. Even though the current war god was still very weak and had not fully matured, even hall elders or great elders in the God clan who basically led the entire clan would not dare to disobey the war god's will. This was because the war god was the soul of the entire God clan. He was their belief and their pillar of support. Only when the war god was present was their God clan truly the God clan. "I want you to swear." Tai Ta still did not find it enough as this matter was directly related to the life of his best brother. He could not afford any mistakes. "I, Adriana, swear." A month later, the elven god tree that had remained rooted in the forbidden grounds of the elves for millions of years vanished. Meanwhile, a vast swathe of kneeling people had already gathered. They extended from the top of the mountain to the base. From afar, it even seemed like the entire mountain had donned armor made from countless 100 races cultivators. That was not all. There were also countless cultivators of the 100 races who knelt on the land around the mountain. They reached into the hundreds of millions. It was such a grand view that it was enough to shock anyone and everyone. This was because today was the day the war god would leave this world and venture into an entirely new one. Everyone from the 100 races would gather here to send off the war god as long as they could. Across the wasteland continent, there were even more members of the 100 races who could not make it due to their strength and the distance, or there would have been even more people gathered here. The golden divine hall at the top of War God Mountain that everyone knelt towards suddenly began to shine with a dazzling golden light. The light was so bright that it outshone the sun, replacing it as the only source of light in the world. It illuminated the wasteland continent one last time. The War God Hall slowly rose up from War God Mountain, climbing higher and higher and faster and faster. In the end, it turned into a streak of golden light, shooting into outer space at an extraordinary speed. At the same time, a considerable swirl gradually formed in outer space, slowly transforming into the gate to the Saints' world. The War God Hall that had become a golden streak of light rapidly approached the gate. At that moment, the War God Hall gained worldwide attention. Regardless of the humans, the sea race, magical beasts or even forsaken saints, countless cultivators all raised their heads to watch the War God Hall leave. They did not do this to see Tai Ta off, but to see the War God Hall enter the spatial tunnel. Many people revealed envious expressions because they knew that the Saint's world was a higher space. If Saint Emperors entered the Saint's world, it would become countless times easier to reach the origin realm, hence, many Saint Emperors yearned for the Saint's world. Unfortunately, it was impossible to pass through the tunnel without the strength of the origin realm. Jian Chen sat on a rock and drank by himself gloomily on Three Saint Island. He watched the War God Hall approach the spatial tunnel and raised his glass for Tai Ta. He saw Tai Ta off from there, wishing that everything would go his friend's way in the Saint's world. War God, the Saint's world has a total of 49 great planes. The spatial tunnel's connection in the Saint's world is not fixed, so please leave everything to me. I'll control the direction in the spatial tunnel to prevent us from ending up on some remote plane. Adriana's voice rang out inside the War God Hall. Finally, under the gazes of countless people, the War God Hall arrived before the spatial tunnel. However, at this moment, an indescribably tremendous might erupted from the War God Hall. The pressure seemed to make it the supreme ruler of the universe, making the entire universe tremble. Even the laws of the world had almost shattered before it. At this moment, the War God Hall was surrounded in a green light that teemed with the presence of life. The moment the green light appeared, the world trembled and the celestial bodies dimmed. Countless stars darkened. The green light seemed to be enough to destroy the universe. With its appearance, the surrounding space was all reduced to darkness because the light was just too powerful. It was so great that it could destroy a massive planet in a single moment, completely exceeding what the space in this world could withstand. When a meteor 100 kilometers in diameter approached the green light, it was reduced to dust silently. The expressions of countless experts who witnessed this scene from the distant Tianyuan continent changed drastically. Their faces all became extremely pale because the very depths of their souls trembled before the pressure. The eyes of all the origin realm experts in the world narrowed. They were wholly fixated on the green light around the War God Hall as respect appeared in their gazes. Chapter 1660. Going together. There were also some origin realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints who remained in this world. They all showed expressions of fear as the pressure was far greater than anything they had ever felt from the Spirit King. God King, Jian Chen stared at the green light from Three Saint Island and murmured to himself. He had seen God Kings many times. Both Protector Shui and Adriana had come down to this world, but this was the first time he had seen the true might of a God King. They could annihilate universes with a twitch of their finger. In the depths of space, a violet sea of lighting gradually formed. Thick bolts of violet lightning crackled as they rapidly approached Adriana with an indescribable presence of the world. Now that Adriana's strength as a God King was exposed, the world no longer accepted her, so judgment descended. The judgment contained extraordinary power. Let alone the fact that Adriana was weakened and unable to use her full strength, even when she was at peak condition, she definitely would have passed away from such a trial, unless she used the treasure that the experts of the God clan had bequeathed to her for the exact purpose of protecting her from the judgment of the world. However, before the violet sea of lightning had approached Adriana, the War God Hall had already entered the tunnel to the Saint's world while shrouded by the presence of light. It vanished from the world, and with its disappearance, Adriana's presence vanished as well. No longer able to sense Adriana's presence, the sea of violet lightning gradually dispersed in the end. Very soon, the universe returned to its previous peaceful state. Jian Chen sat on Three Saint Island silently as he drank by himself. He gazed at the calm space in a daze. He knew that Tai Ta had left. He had left this world, and he had no idea when they would meet again. Perhaps, they would not meet again. The countless people kneeling towards War God Mountain rose on the wasteland continent. All of them were filled with a heavy reluctance to part with the War God. The War God Hall that had basically become the representation of the wasteland continent had vanished, now replaced by a golden statue. The statue stood 300 meters tall and seemed lifelike as if it was Tai Ta himself. A mysterious power circulated within it. It stood there silently with an indomitable spirit, radiating with power. It shone with golden light, which illuminated the surroundings. This was a statue that Tai Ta had left behind. The statue contained his power. It became the new symbol of the 100 races and was also a powerful defense, used to protect the 100 races. The uproar caused by Tai Ta's departure settled very soon. His departure made all his good friends feel depressed, while the people who had no ties to him did not care at all. At most, they would just think back to when Tai Ta led the 100 races against the world of Forsaken Saints and the crisis of the world and sigh as a result. Meanwhile, all the Forsaken Saints living in the other world basically felt relieved and joyful for Tai Ta's departure, without any exception whatsoever. Tai Ta's departure meant that there was one less powerful origin realm expert for the world. The world of Forsaken Saints had gained a complete, firm footing in the world of the Tian Yuan continent now. Whether it was the Tian Yuan continent, Beast God continent, Wasteland continent or the Sea realm, they had gained a sizable piece of territory in all these places. They did not continue to expand unceasingly, as the upper echelon of the foreign world understood that although Jian Chen had told them that they could buy land as they pleased, expanding too recklessly would lead to the interference of origin realm experts. The Forsaken Saints were currently attempting to unite with the people of the world completely. The people in charge of the world of Forsaken Saints did not wish to become locked in a dispute with the origin realm experts of the other world as it would be detrimental to their race's future developments. Aside from that, they were not overly ambitious in the first place. They only wished to find a safe place for their weaker clansmen. The sainthood experts would mostly remain in their original world. With the entry of the Forsaken Saints, the world of Forsaken Saints also opened itself up to the people of the four races. The abundant energy of the world and origin energy in the world of Forsaken Saints had drawn over quite a few sainthood experts across the four races. Apart from that, many of the heavenly resources and treasures in the world of Forsaken Saints could not be compared to the other worlds as their origin energy had never run out, allowing them to grow in an environment rich in origin energy across so many years. Just this was enough for many sainthood experts to treat the world of Forsaken Saints as a holy land. Many sainthood experts set off by themselves in search of fortuitous encounters to increase their strength. Although the laws of the world were gradually reaching completion in the world of the Tian Yuan continent and origin energy was reappearing, it would not be able to rival the world of Forsaken Saints so soon. As a result, the world of Forsaken Saints became a place where many sainthood experts needed to journey to. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed since Tai Ta's departure. In those 3 years, Jian Chen remained on Three Saint Island, rarely ever leaving the island. He did not pay attention to the developments of the outside world, nor did he interfere with anything on the Tian Yuan continent. He lived a life away from society. Jian Chen had taken his parents to Three Saint Island very early on. They lived on Three Saint Island. Yu Yu and Huang Luan were also cultivating on Three Saint Island. Jian Chen did not go into seclusion or cultivate across these years. He lived a straightforward and plain life, completely living like an ordinary person. He would take the boat out with Changyang Ba and Shengguan Aojian from time to time to go fishing. He seemed to be extremely satisfied. In recent years, Shengguan Aojian had stopped cultivating as well. He spent all his time by his father's side, but only he knew that he was not happy at all despite often smiling and laughing on the surface. Instead, he felt that he was in extremely low spirits. He knew his father. He understood that the changes with his father were just signs of him leaving this world soon. By the fireside, Jian Chen, Shengguan Aojian, Shengguan Mu'er, Changyang Ba, Baiyun Tian, Yu Yu, Huang Luan and so on all ate the roast fish with great interest. The entire family drank some alcohol and talked about everything. They were cheerful. Although Huang Luan and Yu Yu were the ones who had been formally wed to Jian Chen, they did not feel any reluctance to accept Shengguan Mu'er at all. Instead, they accepted Shengguan Mu'er as their elder sister, as there were many cases of a man taking up many wives on the Tianyuan continent, let alone someone as outstanding as Jian Chen. At this moment, the expression of Jian Chen who was eating his fish changed. He slowly put down the fish he was eating and said to everyone, "I have some matter that I must attend to, so I must leave temporarily. I will return very soon." With that, Jian Chen vanished. At the same time, there was a flash of violet light across the distant sky, disappearing into the horizon. The Cross Mountains were the largest mountain range on the Tianyuan continent. At the same time, it was a forbidden zone to many human cultivators. Even saint rulers could not set foot in there carelessly because a powerful magical beast clan controlled the mountain range. It was the Gilligan clan. Even though the situation with the world had changed, the Gilligan clan was not affected because their dwelling was basically a place humans never set foot in. Coupled with the deterrence from the winged tiger god, even saint emperors were not bold enough to provoke them, allowing the clan to continue thriving. At this moment, on a mountain peak that reached into the clouds in the depths of the Cross Mountains, a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance sat on a stone seat. His clothes were simple, and his ink-black hair was let down casually behind him, buffeted in the wild wind. Before the middle-aged man was a stone table. There were two exquisitely crafted jade cups on the table and a jug of alcohol that was not particularly large. It gave off an enchanting fragrance. At this moment, a violet streak of light arrived with a flash. A young man who only seemed to be in his 20s had appeared on the top of the mountain. The young man was very handsome. His face was resolute, and his eyebrows were straight and defined. He gave off a sense of sharpness, while his eyes shone brightly as if swords were hiding in them. The young man was Jian Chen. "Shen Jian, why have you called me here?" Jian Chen looked at the middle-aged man on the stone seat and asked calmly. The middle-aged man was the supreme ruler of the world of forsaken saints, the Spirit King. Shen Jian extended his hand to invite Jian Chen to sit down. He said, "I've called you over because I have something important I want to discuss with you." Jian Chen sat down before Shen Jian, and Shen Jian personally poured a cup of alcohol for Jian Chen. He said, "The matters with the world of forsaken saints have basically been dealt with. It's almost impossible for my strength to increase if I remain here, so I plan on going to the higher world." Shen Jian looked at Jian Chen and continued, "What about you? When do you plan on leaving?" Jian Chen did not hurry. He took a tiny sip of the alcohol. The alcohol was a rare, precious variety, but Jian Chen was unable to taste its deliciousness in his mouth at all. Instead, it was filled with bitterness. "I'm not like you, lonely and basically having no ties apart from the clansmen of the world of forsaken saints. I can't come and go as I please, with nothing holding me down. There are just too many ties in this world for me. Not only are there the parents who raised me, but I also have wives and many friends who had once fought alongside me. The saints' world is dangerous. In this world, no one can stop us, but once we go to the saints' world, we're nothing. I might never be able to see the people close to me ever again once I leave," Jian Chen said bitterly. "So you plan on staying here forever?" Shen Jian asked. Jian Chen shook his head, "I will go to the saints' world, but I'm not going to leave in a hurry. At the very least, I have to spend some more time with my parents and my wives." "Actually, you can take your parents and those close to you with you. Although they haven't reached the origin realm, as long as you use something that can hold people, you'll still be able to pass through the spatial tunnel and enter the saints' world," said Shen Jian. "With my current strength, it'll be difficult to gain a stable footing in the saints' world. My life will be in danger from even the slightest carelessness. Am I supposed to take my parents with me and live a life on the run? If that's the case, I might as well leave them here so they can live a peaceful and happy life instead." Jian Chen laughed self-deprecatingly. He had never considered taking his parents with him to the saints' world. At the very least, he needed the power to be able to gain a stable footing in the higher world and ensure that he could protect his parents before even considering the thought. When do you plan on leaving? Jian Chen continued. There was a sliver of mixed feelings in his gaze for Shen Jian. After all, the two of them were people from the same world in the past, and they were now stranded in a foreign place. Although they had been opponents for a period of time, Jian Chen still felt familiar with Shen Jian. I can leave whenever I want, but just as you've said, the saints' world is dangerous. With my current strength, I'll probably even struggle to keep myself alive, so I planned on going with you. With our strength combined, I believe we'll be able to gain a footing in the saints' world without long. The Spirit King looked at Jian Chen and said seriously. After a slight moment of thought, Jian Chen agreed with pleasure. He said, "All right, we can go together, but you need to give me some time." "All right." Chapter 1661, Refining the Profound Sword Qi. All of a sudden, Jian Chen felt like he no longer had much time left in this world after agreeing with the Spirit King's suggestion go to the Saints' world together. His departure would be much sooner than expected. As a result, Jian Chen valued every single day of the remaining time even more. He spent even more time by his parents' and wives' sides. Apart from them, he also visited his old friends frequently, such as Qin Xiao, Tian Muling, Qin Ji, Du Gufeng, and so on. Several decades had passed, so the status of his old friends had undergone drastic changes. Whenever they gathered together and spoke about matters of the past, they would all sigh as reminiscence flooded their eyes. 5 days later, Jian Chen heard some heartbreaking news. Kendall's wife, Xiaofan, passed away. During her funeral, Jian Chen appeared with his wives, Changyang Ba, and Bai Yuntian to send her off one last time. Initially, it was supposed to be a very ordinary funeral, but with Jian Chen and everyone else's appearance, her funeral became an extremely great matter, raising the attention of many across the world and apparently caused quite the uproar. Many fighters in this world all sighed emotionally. Xiaofan was a mortal, yet her funeral could actually draw the personal attendance of Sovereign Jian Chen. What a great honor was that! Some people even said that if they could enjoy something like that when they died, they would end their lives right now without any hesitation at all. Xiaofang's departure had caused quite a few people to feel envious, as well as quite a lot of regret. They were envious about her friendship with Sovereign Jian Chen and regretful over how she had such a great but short life. Sans mourned for his mother as he personally buried her. He remained remarkably calm throughout the entire process. He did not cry or show any sadness, but his silence gave away the grief he hid inside. 7 days later, Xiaofang's funeral came to an end. Jian Chen comforted Sans and was about to leave. "Captain, I want to leave the Flame Mercenaries. Please accept my departure." At this moment, Sans knelt down and pleaded Jian Chen. Jian Chen paused before turning around and looking at Sans with mixed feelings. He sighed gently. "Sans, your father personally founded the Flame Mercenaries. They are the memories of your father, so how can you leave? Also, I intended for you to inherit the position of captain, except your current strength and prestige in the Flame Mercenaries would definitely lead to the dissatisfaction of many if I passed it on too soon, which is why I still haven't done that. I plan to pass on the position at a suitable time once you've earned your own prestige. You would be the captain of the Flame Mercenaries at that time." Sans shook his head. "Captain, I don't want to inherit the position of captain. Although my father personally founded the Flame Mercenaries, you were the one who did all the development. It had nothing to do with my father. How can I inherit the position of captain? Please revoke it, captain." Jian Chen suddenly became stern after hearing Sans' words. He said with a gruff voice, "Sans, do you know what kind of organization the Flame Mercenaries has now become on the continent? The position of captain is enough to make countless people green with envy, yet you don't care about it at all. If your father knew about this, he would not be able to rest easy in the afterlife. Sans knelt on the ground and pushed his head deeply into the ground. He said sorrowfully, "Captain, I'm sorry. I've disappointed you and let you down. I've let down all the years of support you've provided me across the years. You can only blame me for my lack of ambition and ability. The passing of my mother has made me let go of a lot of things in the world. Now, I no longer wish for any glory on the Tianyuan continent. I only want to manage this inn because it's the only thing that my mother has left to me. It contains the memories of my mother. Captain, please accept my resignation from the Flame Mercenaries." Jian Chen looked at Sans, both furious and angered. He appeared exasperated about how Sans failed to live up to his expectations. However, there was also a profound sense of helplessness on his face. He could already see that Sans had made up his mind. Any more attempts at persuasion would not have much effect at all. He would end up forcing Sans instead. Jian Chen sighed at the sky after a long while and said, whatever. Since you've already decided, I will respect your choice." With that, Jian Chen became dejected. He left with a wave of his sleeve. He had decided for Sans to become the next captain of the Flame Mercenaries long ago, but Sans' choice had just disappointed him. "Thank you, Captain," Sans replied politely. "Sans, you have to remember that the Flame Mercenaries exists because of your father. If you think it through today and want to return to the Flame Mercenaries, that door will always be open to you," Jian Chen's vigorous voice rang out. Sans stood up and looked at Jian Chen with eyes filled with tears. He thought, "Savior, you've helped my mother and I far too much in the past years. I'll never be able to repay your kindness, so how can I replace Bai Lian as the captain? Bai Lian is your sister after all. I can never do something like that, never." Several years later, Jian Chen finally made up his mind to make the final preparations for Saint's World. After bidding farewell to everyone, he left Three Island all by himself and went to the tunnel connected to the world of Forsaken Saints. The tunnel between the two worlds was no longer as empty as before. Instead, it had become hectic. There would be people of various races passing through the tunnel between the two worlds from time to time. There was an island in the water near the tunnel created by a Saint Emperor. Various merchants had set up stands there, holding huge auctions to auction off treasures obtained from the world of Forsaken Saints. It had already developed into quite a large city. Jian Chen did not stay there for too long. He turned into a blur and directly entered the tunnel, heading towards the world of Forsaken Saints. The tunnel had stabilized now, but it still reacted violently to Jian Chen's entry with his current strength. It immediately began to shake tremendously as violet streams of energy gradually formed, wreaking havoc in the tunnel. Even Saint Emperors had to handle the streams of energy carefully. There were still quite a lot of people in the tunnel right now, so the tremors and streams of energy immediately made a few people pale. They all cried out and charged towards the exit as quickly as they could. Jian Chen concealed his presence and carefully moved through the tunnel. He knew that he was too powerful, basically having reached the limits that the tunnel could withstand. If he did not conceal his presence, he would end up making the entire tunnel collapse. At the same time, he flicked a finger and shot out strands of sword qi, dispersing the energy in the distance to protect the cultivators who fled from harm. The sword qi had only reached peak Saint Emperor in strength at most, so he did not have to worry about it damaging the tunnel. When Jian Chen emerged from the tunnel, he saw a familiar, blood-red world. In the blood-red world was a red sun and moon, as if they had been painted by blood. It caused the entire world to be filled with a malevolence feeling. This was the second time Jian Chen had come to the world of Forsaken Saints. He was accompanied by Shangguan Mu'er during the first time and was hostile towards the world back then. He had come for battle, which resulted in a great battle between him and the Spirit King. This was the second time, and this time, the world of Forsaken Saints had gone from enemies to friends with the Tianyuan continent's world. Even though there would be conflicts between the people of the two worlds from time to time, it was mostly due to interests and did not take a toll on their overall relationship. There were quite a few people gathered on the top of the world mountains. They all stood afar from the tunnel and discussed the changes to the tunnel with lingering fear. Many of them behaved like they had just survived a great disaster. None of them discovered that a young man had walked out of the destabilized tunnel composedly soon after they exited. He was now hidden among the crowd. The young man had erased his presence, preventing anyone from sensing his existence. Even when people glanced past him from time to time, they would not take note of him, missing him extremely easily. There was a teleportation formation set up on the top of the world mountains, 2 kilometers away from the tunnel. As the world mountains were just too dangerous, even receival experts needed to be careful when climbing the mountains as they could die from any carelessness. It made it even more impossible for cultivators who were at sainthood or even below that. As a result, the teleportation formation especially existed to send people out of the mountains. Not only did a few sainthood experts use the teleportation to ascend and descend the mountains, but the protectors and elders also used it most of the time as well after its creation. They basically did not use their strength to climb the mountains anymore. Jian Chen stood in the crowd. As his gaze landed on the teleportation formation, a gleam of light immediately flashed through his eyes, but he did not become too interested in the teleportation formation. With a single moment, he seemed to have become an arrow, charging beyond the top of the world mountains with a flash. Quickly, he arrived at a hazardous zone where even Origin Realm experts could die. He flew through the world mountains without any fear at all. Soon afterwards, Jian Chen stopped on a sword-shaped mountain 1,000 kilometers away. Around him, the strong winds whistled loudly, forming invisible wind blades that swept past Jian Chen mercilessly. The wind was so powerful that even Jian Chen had not seen something like this before. Even Saint Emperors would struggle to endure it and would be torn to shreds without much time. Thunder boomed above his head as lightning constantly fell. Bolts of thick lightning would rip through the blood-red sky with deafening sounds frequently. The lightning was even more powerful than the wind. Even receival experts would become injured if they were careless. They could even die. The laws here are the most powerful. I'll refine the profound sword chi here. Jian Chen ignored the strong winds and sea of lightning, just sitting down like that. He began to cultivate. The strong winds ripped through his clothes but failed to harm his body at all. The lightning in the sky would fall from time to time, striking Jian Chen's head accurately, but not a single hair of his would be blown away. Chapter 1662, The Sword Chi's Appearance Throws World in Shock. 1. The profound sword chi was a technique that the sword spirits had passed on to Jian Chen. It was the greatest sword technique he knew so far, as well as his greatest trump card. This was because the old master of the sword spirits had poured his heart out and devoted a tremendous amount of time to create this powerful sword technique. It had reached the peak of God tier, and its name had rung through the entire Immortals world in the past as well. It was known as one of the greatest God tier battle skills in the Immortals world. Logically, the greater a technique was, the greater the requirement on the cultivator was to comprehend and use it. Usually, God-tier techniques required people to be immortal monarchs at the very least to comprehend and gain a grasp over them, but not all techniques were like that. There were a few special ones that could still be learnt and used regardless of the person's strength, even if they had not become an immortal monarch. The profound sword chi was one of these techniques. Jian Chen sat on the top of the mountains and ignored the buffeting from the strong winds. He allowed the bolts of lightning to fall from the sky and land onto him. He did not take any defensive measures at all, directly beginning his refinement there. Even Origin Realm experts suffered the risk of losing their lives in such a horrible environment. No one would go here unless they had to. As a result, just the natural environment here became Jian Chen's best measure of defense. At the same time, with the entire world of Forsaken Saints in perspective, no one aside from the Spirit King could injure him anymore with his 9th-layer chaotic body. The profound sword Qi has a total of 9 strands. Only by refining all of them can the full power of this peak God-tier technique be demonstrated. However, even if I only refine a single strand, its power will still exceed all the sword techniques I know right now. This will become my greatest trump card in the Saint's world. Refining the strands of profound sword Qi is related to my comprehension of the way of the sword. I can only refine all 9 strands when I become a sword god, but right now I've only comprehended to the major achievement of sword origin. It just happens to be enough to refine the first strand of profound sword Qi. If I can reach great perfection of sword origin, I'll be able to refine the second strand. In the future, sword spirit, sword immortal, and sword sage realms will allow me to refine another strand of profound sword Qi when I reach major achievement and great achievement respectively, Jian Chen thought. He thought about the refinement method from the sword spirits and entered a selfless state of comprehension. Profound sword Qi was formed by combining the power of laws from the way of the sword comprehended, the power of the soul, personal cultivation level, and the vital energies of life. As the sword Qi used the power of laws as its primary source of strength and had several other powers combined into it as well, it was much stronger than any power of laws that could be used at that level. Although it seemed simple on the surface, it contained the mysteries of the universe, making it infinitely profound and almost heaven-defying. Only an expert as great as the old master of the sword spirits could come up with something like this. Jian Chen meditated on the top of the mountain as the tremendous energies of life tremored. He had mobilized all the vital energies within him so that they entered the most lively state, preparing to refine the profound sword Qi. At the same time, he had entered his realm of the way of the sword, having his entire consciousness submerged in his major achievement of sword origin. He began to control the power of laws from his way of the sword, fusing it with a part of his soul's power, his vital energies, and a strand of his cultivation's power. This was the first step to refining the profound sword Qi, known as the fusion of heaven and origin. The heaven referred to the power of laws in the way of the sword, as the power came from the world and was one of the 3,000 great ways, so it was called heaven. The origin was not referring to the origin in the origin realm, but the 3 powers present in a cultivator, their cultivation, their vital energies, and their soul. The fusion of the 3 powers was called origin, the origin in refining the profound sword Qi and not the moniker used in the saint's world to refer to a cultivation level. As Jian Chen undertook the first step in the process of refining the profound sword Qi, his body showed signs of withering. This was caused by his vital energies being drained away. During the first step, the power of his soul, cultivation, and life would be constantly drained away, ground away by the power of laws. After all, the power of laws were just too great. Even with Jian Chen's comprehension of the way of the sword remaining at the major achievement of sword origin, the power of laws from that level was still much stronger than the power of his soul, cultivation, and life combined. As Jian Chen meditated, his body gradually withered and his face became haggard as well. The constant consumption during the fusion process of his vital energies, power of the soul, and power of laws caused this scene. At the same time, his chaotic force was being consumed as well. Chaotic force was his power of cultivation, so his chaotic Niden visibly shrank. Although I can use the power of the way of the sword, every time I've used it is just stacking it on top of chaotic force at most, not truly fusing them. Fusing the 4 powers will be extremely difficult, so this first step will be the hardest. I'll need to reach a juncture where I find the balance between the 4 powers if I want to succeed. Then I need to fuse them all in one stroke and complete the first step, Jian Chen thought. He already knew how difficult it would be to refine profound sword Qi. If he failed to complete the first step before his vital energies, power of cultivation, and power of soul ran out, his attempt this time would end in failure. Fortunately, he could recover everything he consumed in the process, so even if he did fail, his life would not be in danger. He could recover and continue trying. Jian Chen spent a total of 10 years on the first step but still failed to succeed. By now, Jian Chen had been reduced to a bag of bones, while his face was waxen. He seemed ancient. His head full of hair had withered as if all the signs of life had been drained from it. I can't last much longer. It's just too difficult to combine the power of my cultivation, soul, life, and way of the sword. It looks like I can only end my first attempt in failure, Jian Chen thought. However, he did not become dejected because the profound sword qi was a peak god-tier technique. Refining it would obviously be difficult. However, just when Jian Chen wanted to give up, a gleam of light suddenly flashed through his eyes. He could clearly feel that although the power of laws continued to eat away the other three powers when they came into contact with each other, a tiny sliver of power had entered the power of laws. A juncture. This is the juncture of success. Jian Chen's attention gathered, and without any hesitation, he immediately poured the vital energies, power of cultivation, and power of soul into the power of laws despite the former three almost running dry. He wanted to complete the most crucial step in a single stroke. Finally, just when Jian Chen's vital energies and power of the soul were about to run dry, he smiled victoriously. 3 inches before his forehead hovered a finger-sized white sword qi. The sword qi was small, but Jian Chen could clearly feel the greatness of the power it was hiding. It had reached a level that was enough to make him shiver. I never thought that the power of laws would become so great after fusing with other powers. Jian Chen stared at the tiny sword qi with great interest. The sword qi was created from the fusion of the powers of his soul, cultivation, life, and laws, so the power contained in the sword qi had even surpassed the power of laws before fusion. This was a power that was even greater than the power of laws. It was on a whole new level, even though it was so weak right now. There are 2 steps to refining the profound sword qi. I've already completed the first step now, but the second step should be much easier in comparison. Chapter 1663, The Sword Qi's Appearance Throws World in Shock. 2. The second step to refining the profound sword qi is to fuse it with the soul. The sword qi will reside in the soul and be nourished there, while its power will constantly increase as my comprehension of the way of the sword deepens. Jian Chen looked at the profound sword qi floating before him. He had become very weak now, to the point where both the power of his soul and vital energies had never been lower before. Right now, he was basically a bag of bones, but he was still filled with excitement and joy. He finally possessed a trump card to protect himself after venturing to the saint's world with the refinement of the profound sword qi. He did not need to fear even if he confronted people stronger than him, given that their difference in strength was not overwhelming of course. Jian Chen closed his eyes and began the second step to refining the profound sword qi, which was also the final step. Only after completing this could he regard his refinement of the profound sword qi as complete. Jian Chen's power of the soul, cultivation, and life was no longer consumed during this step. Although he was unable to recover his lost cultivation for now, his vital energies gradually recovered under the regenerative abilities of the chaotic body. His power of the soul behaved similarly, except it returned extremely slowly compared to his vital energies. Although the second step of refining the profound sword qi was easier than the first, it still took a lot of time. Time flashed by. Jian Chen had completely lost all sense of time as he refined the profound sword qi, so in the blink of an eye, he had spent another 5 years on the second step. The 5 years were just enough for him to complete the second step, and the profound sword qi floating before his forehead vanished at the moment of completion. It entered his sea of consciousness, which nurtured it at all times. Jian Chen opened his eyes the moment he completed the process. He had recovered half of his vital energies in the past 5 years, so his body had returned to its previous state. This was all from the automatic regeneration of his chaotic body. If he focused on regenerating his vital energies, he would recover even faster. Jian Chen stood up from the position that he had remained in for 15 years. With a flash of light through his eyes, a strand of white sword qi immediately appeared above his head. The sword qi was not very big at all. In fact, it could be described as tiny. It was only as long as a finger and shone with dazzling white light. However, the moment the sword qi appeared, a devastatingly powerful pressure erupted from within. As the pressure expanded, the terrifyingly strong winds in the center of the world mountains and the flickering lightning all calmed down. The wind stopped and the lightning vanished as if they had fled in the face of terror. The blood-red sky of the world of forsaken saints became dyed white with the profound sword qi's appearance. The color expanded in all directions, enveloping a region of countless tens of thousands of kilometers. It alarmed many cultivators in the world of forsaken saints. At that moment, countless cultivators in the world of forsaken saints raised their heads in shock. The original inhabitants of the world, the forsaken saints, felt strange inside in particular. After all, they had remained in the world for so long and understood it extremely well. The sky had always been blood-red in their memories and had never changed, yet it actually became white at this moment. What's happening? Why has this happened? Are there experts fighting? Is this the disturbance caused by fighting? Impossible. Even if Origin Realm experts start fighting, the sky won't go from red to white. I think some great treasure has appeared, and this is the light from the treasure. The light originates from the world mountains. Why don't we head over, and we'll know? Immediately, many of the more powerful cultivators gathered towards the world mountains, but no one dared to venture inside in the end. After all, the mountains were just too dangerous. If they went too deep in, even Origin Realm experts would face danger, let alone Saint Emperors. Several Origin Realm experts emerged from the Sacred Spirit Hall. They all stood outside and gazed at the distant sky, revealing surprised expressions. Immediately, quite a few of them rose up to go and see what was happening. Come back. There's no need for you to go. It's all caused by Jian Chen. At this moment, the Spirit King's voice rang out from the Sacred Spirit Hall. He slowly walked out from the Divine Hall in simple clothes. We greet the Spirit King. The Origin Realm experts all bowed towards the Spirit King politely. The ones who had left immediately returned. They understood now. As it turned out, it was all caused by the sovereign of the Tianyuan continent, Jian Chen, so it was no wonder there would be such a great disturbance. The Spirit King stood before the Sacred Spirit Hall with his arms crossed. He looked at the distant sky and became slightly stern. He said, I can sense an extremely powerful sword qi in the depths of the world mountains. The sword qi is so powerful that it can slay godhood experts. Is this the profound sword qi that Jian Chen was speaking of in the past? It sure is terrifying. What? It can slay godhood experts? Spirit King, why, you can't be joking, right? The protectors and elders all became stunned when they heard the Spirit King's words. They could not help but think of Jian Chen's handsome and resolute face as they trembled from the bottom of their hearts. Possessing battle prowess at godhood, even if it was just the weakest among godhood, was already enough to stand supreme in this world. Yet now, a power that could actually slay godhood experts had appeared, so they all became astounded. Jian Chen was still slightly weaker before. It has only been so many years, yet he has already grown to such a level. He has become an existence that I can only look up to, Xiongzhong murmured with complicated emotions. The other protectors and elders experienced mixed feelings as well. In the world mountains, Jian Chen put his profound sword qi away in satisfaction. With a single movement, he left the region. Jumping onto the Ziying sword, he flew fearlessly through the sky and headed directly towards the Sacred Spirit Hall. Jian Chen's strength allowed him to travel at unbelievably great speeds, so he arrived before the Sacred Spirit Hall very soon. His arrival shocked the upper echelon of the Sacred Spirit Hall. All the protectors and elders came out to welcome him. They all bowed towards him, whether they were receival protectors or returnants elders. They said politely and with many other emotions, "We greet Sovereign Jian Chen." They would have never been so polite to Jian Chen in the past, but now that they had learnt that Jian Chen possessed the power to kill godhood experts, they became extremely fearful of him. The Spirit King invited Jian Chen into the sacred spirit hall and asked him, "Have you made all your preparations since you're visiting me now?" Chapter 1664, Fully Prepared. There's one last thing to do. "We can leave this world after this and go to the saint's world," Jian Chen said to Shen Jian. Shen Jian stared at Jian Chen and suddenly smiled. "There must be something I can help out with for this last thing, right?" "That's right." Jian Chen took out a beast fur from his space ring and passed it to Shen Jian. He said, "I still need to cast down a teleportation formation so that we can return to this world. Although we still haven't left, I do know that there are many lower worlds. Without a teleportation formation to pinpoint the location, it'll be extremely difficult to return to here. The materials I lack are written on the beast fur. I hope you can help me with collecting them." A teleportation formation. Shen Jian frowned. If I recall correctly, casting down a teleportation formation is not an easy matter at all. It requires an extremely great mastery over the way of formations. Even though there have been a few teleportation formations in our world, they've come from countless years ago, and they don't possess the power to cross worlds. It'll be quite difficult for you to cast down a teleportation formation from the saint's world to here. I don't need a complete formation. I just need an anchor so that I can pinpoint this world's location. Although it's a little complicated, I don't think it'll take too long for me to cast one down," said Jian Chen. "Alright, I'll help you collect these materials." Afterwards, Jian Chen returned to the Tianyuan continent and used all the power he could muster in that world to find for the missing materials for the teleportation formation. He himself remained in Flame City, absorbing the information about formations from the sword spirits. They sword spirits were not particularly familiar with formations, but they still had been around for a long time after all, so they knew a lot. Just a teleportation formation to act as an anchor was nothing difficult for them to explain. At the same time, Jian Chen visited Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, and Gui Haidao many times in an attempt to learn how to cast a teleportation formation. Unfortunately, Feng Xiaotian was of no help to Jian Chen even though he knew about it slightly. In the end, Jian Chen visited Fairy Hao Yu. After all, she was also a person from the saint's world and obviously possessed broad insight. To Jian Chen's joy, Fairy Hao Yu actually possessed quite some mastery over formations. He immediately asked her about teleportation formations with modesty and benefited greatly in the end. He felt enlightened. Jian Chen visited the Bright Moon Divine Hall often in the following period of time. He asked her about any problems and confusions he encountered about the teleportation formation. Only half a year later, when all the materials he needed were sent to him, did he enter seclusion once again. He devoted himself to studying the teleportation formation and even used up some of his few remaining comprehension tea leaves. Jian Chen had rarely ever come across teleportation formations, so casting them made it even more difficult. Even with the sword spirit's assistance and the knowledge he gained from Fairy Hao Yu, he was still very far away from truly being able to cast down one. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Time passed slowly, while Jian Chen had also failed countless times at creating a teleportation formation. The materials he had on him rapidly depleted. Fortunately, the materials were not the greatest kind, so they could be found in both the Tianyuan continent and the world of Forsaken Saints. Jian Chen did not need to worry about insufficient materials given how there were countless people across the two worlds collecting materials for him. Finally, Jian Chen achieved success in the 5th year. A glimmering formation was inscribed on a piece of rock, radiating with a powerful pulse of energy. Jian Chen revealed much joy as he stared at the complicated formation with almost perfect inscriptions. Even though the formation did not possess the ability to teleport people away, which made it only half complete, it was more than enough to act as an anchor for the Tianyuan continent. He no longer needed to fear being unable to find the Tianyuan continent in the Saints' world with this formation. Afterwards, Jian Chen removed a fist-sized sphere of stone from the teleportation formation and carefully placed it into a wooden box, putting it away. The stone sphere possessed a form of connection with the teleportation formation, which would be crucial for him to return after going to the Saints' world. Afterwards, Jian Chen cast down more than a dozen other formations in various places on the Tianyuan continent as he was afraid that the teleportation formation would be damaged. He chose extremely remote locations for each one, and he left behind a sword formation to protect each one. At the same time, he removed a similar spherical stone from each formation, storing them away carefully. Jian Chen still did not feel that it was secure enough. In the end, he directly flew into deep outer space and cast down 3 formations across the 2 halves of the moon. Afterwards, he cast down a few more on a few distant planets from the moon. These would form his path back home. He could not afford to make any mistakes. Even though no one would ever destroy his work if he announced it with his current prestige, he needed to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. Jian Chen was finally relieved after settling the matter of the teleportation formation. He returned to the Tianyuan continent and immediately summoned all the Origin Realm experts in his world. Very soon, the Sea Goddess, Houston, Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, Gui Haidao, Shangwan Mu'er, Xiao Jin, Xiao Ling, and so on all gathered in Flame City. They all seemed to understand why Jian Chen had summoned them there, so they all experienced extremely mixed emotions. Great-grandfather, seniors, I will be setting off for the Saints' world before long. I was wondering if any of you wished to come along. However, the Saints' world is exceedingly dangerous, where the Origin Realm is basically nothing powerful. You have to be mentally prepared, Jian Chen said with mixed feelings. He was unable to remain calm as he was going to leave soon. Although he would still return in the future as he had even cast down the teleportation formations, he did not know who would still be alive when he did return. Oh yeah. We're finally going to the Saints' world. Big brother, you have to take me to go search for Master. I miss Master so much. Aside from Xiao Ling, who cheered excitedly, everyone else remained silent. After a moment of silence, the Sea Goddess broke the silence first. I'm still a little too weak right now. There's no hurry for me to go to the Saints' world, so it won't be too late for me to go after I reach reciprocity. Originally, there were 10 of us who arrived in this world. Currently, only the 3 of us have awakened. We won't be going to the Saints' world for now. We plan on staying here for another 10,000 years. If they still don't awaken in those 10,000 years, we can only choose to leave, said Feng Xiaotian. He also spoke about the intentions of Gui Haidao and Yang Lai. Jian Chen, I'll go to the Saints' world with you. I have the Empyrean Demon Orb, so I shouldn't become a burden to you, Houston smiled, deciding to go with Jian Chen. After the discussions, only the White Tiger, Xiao Jin, Xiao Ling, Houston, and Shangwan Mu'er planned on going to the Saints' world with Jian Chen. Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, Gui Haidao, and the Sea Goddess all chose to stay behind. Jian Chen, you have to take me with you. You can't forget about me, the great Nubis. At this moment, Nubis barged in loudly despite having been missing for quite a while. He had directly yelled out, showing no respect towards Jian Chen. Chapter 1665, Departure. Jian Chen broke into laughter when he saw Nubis charge in from outside. He said, Nubis, haven't you been living quite the life with your 2 concubines? Going with me to the Saints' world will be a life of blood, so why bother at all? You have to bear in mind that even if I go to the Saints' world with my current strength, it'll be very difficult to even gain a stable footing. A bloody life is the best life in my eyes because only a life like that will be a challenge. Jian Chen, I've put it very clearly. If you want to go to the saint's world, you can't leave me behind. Otherwise, you're no longer my brother, Nubis said. He was filled with excitement and eagerness, clearly anticipating the journey to the saint's world. Oh right. I heard that only Origin Realm experts can pass through the spatial tunnel to the saint's world. I still haven't reached the Origin Realm, so think of something for me. Just don't leave me behind, said Nubis. He and Jianchen had forged their brotherhood through adversity, making their bond anything but ordinary. As a result, Nubis spoke to Jianchen extremely casually, unlike the other Saint Emperors. All right. I can only take you with me since you insist so much. Jianchen could only agree to Nubis coming along. Although Nubis was a little weak to go to the saint's world right now, his rate of improvement would definitely be far greater there than if he remained in this world. Afterwards, Jianchen visited a few old friends, bidding his final farewells. He believed that it would be at least a dozen millennia or even several dozen millennia before he would return. Saint Emperors only had a lifespan of 10 millennia, so his old friends probably would have passed away already when he returned again. Although the origin energy of the world was gradually recovering and there was now the world of Forsaken Saints, a paradise for cultivation, reaching the origin realm was still not an easy accomplishment. Jianchen then went to find Hao Wu in a remote mountain range. Hao Wu had already become a Saint Emperor now, but he had become an old man instead. He had left Czar Kaiyun and secluded himself in the mountains, cultivating in solitary. Jianchen's emotions became extremely mixed when he saw the wrinkly, gray-haired old man because this was his father-in-law. After explaining that he was about to leave this world, Hao Wu fell silent. He only responded with a soft sigh after quite a while, Jianchen, I hope you can look after Mu'er well in the saint's world. I will. Jianchen swore an oath to himself and Hao Wu. Jianchen left after his conversation with Hao Wu. Soon, he arrived 1,000 kilometers away from where Hao Wu cultivated. There was a mountain that directly plunged into the clouds there, and there was also a small, wooden hut on it. A beauty in a violet dress sat before the wooden hut, gazing into the distance in a daze. Her face was filled with uncontainable sorrow and memories. She was the ancestor of the Tsar family from the city of God, Tsar Kaiyun. She had left the clan many years ago, no longer interfering with any matters in the clan. She had always remained on the mountain, living a life of seclusion. Aside from cultivation, she liked to do this the most, gazing into the distance in a trance. The direction she gazed in was where Hao Wu had settled down. 1,000 kilometers was originally nothing more than a step for Tsar Kaiyun, a Saint Emperor, but it felt like the ends of the earth in her heart. Jianchen hovered in the air and gazed at Tsar Kaiyun. His feelings were mixed, and he left after heaving a soft sigh. Tsar Kaiyun had failed to sense Jianchen's arrival at all. In the end, Jianchen visited Tianjin. Tianjin had originally become a Saint Emperor through the Saint's world. Jianchen then gifted him a violet cloud peach, allowing his strength to increase drastically once again. He was now an 8th heavenly layer Saint Emperor, making him one of the most powerful people below the origin realm. Jianchen had a long conversation with Tianjin. Then he pulled out a white fur from his space ring and forcefully shoved it into Tianjin's hands. This was the fur of the winged tiger god, which covered the way of slaughter from Mo Tianyun. The origin realm experts of this world had tried to comprehend it many times, but they failed to get anything out of it in the end. After a few cycles, it returned to Jianchen's hands. Right now, Jianchen had given the beast fur to Tianjin solemnly. Mo Tianyun had left behind the way of slaughter, and Mo Tianyun founded Mercenary City. As the great elder of Mercenary City, it was only right for Tianjin to inherit the beast fur. Whether he could actually comprehend the way of slaughter would be a whole different matter. Jianchen had considered giving the beast fur to Shengguanaojian, but he possessed the innate chaotic body. He had his own path to take, so giving the beast fur to Tianjin would be a better choice. After bidding farewell to Tianjin, Jian Chen visited the Supreme Divine Hall left behind by Mo Tianyun. He took away Kaya, who remained unconscious in the crystal coffin with him, as well as the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast who had always been watching over her silently. Jian Chen was currently helpless about Kaya's situation. As a result, he planned on taking her to the saint's world with him. He hoped to find a way to awaken her there. Afterwards, Jian Chen went to the world of forsaken saints again. He found the four brothers who were cultivating there and asked them if they wanted to go to the saint's world with him. Jian Chen, we don't want to go to the saint's world yet. We want to cultivate for some time in the world of forsaken saints and go once we're stronger, said Ada. Jian Chen nodded and said nothing more. He turned around and left. 3 days later, all the Origin Realm experts in the two worlds arrived on the Tian Yuan continent because this day was Jian Chen and the Spirit King's day of departure. Everyone had come to see them off. Aside from the Origin Realm experts from the Tian Yuan continent, there were many saint emperors and people who were familiar with Jian Chen. This included Tian Jian and the few remaining elders of Mercenary City, Tianmu Ling from the Tianmu clan, as well as the 2 elders of Tianmu Ling who were frequently by her side, Huang Tianba of the Huang family, Qin Shao of the Tianqin clan, Qin Ji of the Qinhuang kingdom and their imperial protectors, Quan Yukai and Kara Liwei of the Radiant Saint Master Union, the Turtle clan experts, Hall Master of the Sea Goddess Hall, Xia Wang, and so on. In general, basically everyone who was familiar with Jian Chen that was still in the living world was present. Even the 4 brothers who were cultivating in the world of forsaken saints had come specially to see them off. Changyang, who had left the Pure Heart Pavilion for the first time since he returned after severing his emotions and his desires to see Jian Chen off one last time. However, there was no longer any lingering signs of brotherhood in his eyes. There was only peace and calmness. Jian Chen's heart throbbed with Changyang, whose change. His eldest brother was no longer the eldest brother of the past. Xianger, you have to return alive. You cannot forget that your father and I are still waiting for you here, Bai Yuntian and Changyang Ba said to Jian Chen tearfully, unwilling to part with him. The 2 of them understood that his departure this time would be permanent for them. Brother, I will always wait for you here. Don't forget that you have me, your sister. If you don't return within 10,000 years, you'll probably never see me again. Bai Lian's tears poured down her cheeks as well as she said this to Jian Chen while choking back her sobs. With her talent, reaching Saint Emperor was no problem, but the Origin Realm would be almost impossible for her. Father, mother, you have to be careful in the Saint's world. If you don't come back in the next 10,000 years, I'll go to the Saint's world personally to find you, Shengguan Aojian said with great determination. He was not just making conversation about going up to the higher world after 10,000 years. If it were not for the fact that he was worried he might not find his parents in the Saint's world, he had no need to wait 10 millennia to go up. Jian Chen, you have to return. Yu Yu and Huang Luan were in tears. The 2 of them were in horrible spirits. Jian Chen's departure this time seemed eternal to them. At this moment, the bright moon divine hall flew over from afar, gently landing on the ground. Soon afterwards, its doors swung open, and Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out, "You 4 who haven't reached the Origin Realm, it's impossible for you to survive in the space of the tunnel. Come in here." With that, Rui Jin, Hong Lian, Hei Yu, and Nubis all entered the bright moon divine hall. It won't be smooth sailing traveling through the spatial tunnel. If we're unlucky, we'll come across some danger. I advise everyone to enter my bright moon divine hall aside from Jian Chen and the Spirit King, just in case of any accidents, Fairy Hao Yu continued. Xiao Zhong immediately became displeased when he heard that. He said, "Your divine hall doesn't seem sturdy at all. With my strength at reciprocity, how is it possible for me to be safer if I stay in your divine hall? Let alone your puny strength at reciprocity, even if Jian Chen moves through the spatial tunnel with his current strength, it won't be as safe as remaining in my divine hall." It's just that I have to pay too great of a price if I want to return to the saints' world by myself, which is why I have to go with you, Fairy Hao said coldly. Everyone could tell that reciprocity was nothing in her eyes. Xiongzhong did not dare to say anything more. Instead, he glanced at Jian Chen. He would have definitely believed that Fairy Hao was telling tales if she did not use Jian Chen as a point of comparison. He would have never complied with his personality. However, now that Fairy Hao had mentioned that even Jian Chen would be safer by remaining in her divine hall, she clearly held no regard for Jian Chen at all. He wanted to see Jian Chen's reaction. Jian Chen rubbed his nose and smiled resplendently. Fairy Hao is the reincarnation of a great expert in the saints' world. Since it's her who said it, there are definitely reasons why it's true. It's best if you all enter the divine hall. Jian Chen had never been sure about the ins and outs of Fairy Hao. Even with his current strength, Fairy Hao still seemed unfathomable in his eyes. Chapter 1666, The Saints' World. The eyes of all the Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints narrowed as soon as they heard that Fairy Hao was the reincarnation of a great expert from the Saints' world. Their faces all changed, while Xiongzhong, who had been displeased with her, no longer dared to say anything more. Shen Jian's gaze towards the bright moon divine hall changed as well. He could guess from the way Fairy Hao spoke that she was probably quite a powerful expert in the saints' world in the past, or she would not have been able to talk like that. After the minor incident, no one retorted Fairy Hao's words anymore. The Origin Realm experts of both worlds who planned on going to the saints' world all entered the bright moon divine hall. Even Xiongzhong and Shangguan Mu'er, who were both at reciprocity, did not stay outside, which only left Jian Chen and Shen Jian outside. There were quite a few Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints, but there were not many who chose to go to the Saints' world. Aside from Xiongzhong, there were only 4 other Returnants elders. The other Receival experts all decided to stay behind. Since we're all prepared, let's set off, Fairy Hao's voice rang out. She was clearly rather eager. She was extremely worried about her father's safety, so she wanted to return to the saints' world as soon as possible. Wait! Jian Chen suddenly said, before taking out the Radiant Saint artifact. He removed Kaiya's crystal casket from it, and to no surprise, a fist-sized beast lay on the casket. Fairy Hao, please take my friend with you. She should be safer with you than me, said Jian Chen. The appearance of the crystal casket immediately attracted the attention of all the Origin Realm experts present. However, they were not looking at the casket, but the fist-sized beast that was laying on it. They all shivered inside because they could sense the powerful presence of an Origin Realm expert from the beast. Jian Chen did not leave the crystal casket in the artifact space, mainly because of the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast. It had already reached the Origin Realm, so it would destroy the artifact space just from the slightest carelessness. Jian Chen did not dare to place Kaiya and the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast in the Inata Tower either, as he would never reveal the Inata Tower after going to the Saints' world. After all, he had not fully refined the Inata Tower yet. Once he exposed it in the Saints' world, supreme experts might end up sensing the tower's presence. After waving goodbye to everyone, Jian Chen flew away from the Tianyuan continent with Shen Jian. He charged towards the spatial tunnel leading to the Saints' world, while the bright moon divine hall followed behind them. Yu Yu and Bai Lian waved goodbye on the Tianyuan continent sorrowfully. They were too weak, so they did not go to the higher world with Jian Chen. To another side, Qin Qin, Xiao Qian, and Xiao Yu stood together. Qin Qin watched Jian Chen gradually disappear gloomily. Master Jian Chen, farewell. I'll probably never see you again from today onwards, thought Qin Qin. Tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably as her heart experienced unprecedented pain. You have to be careful in the tunnel. You can't be careless at all. Jian Chen, you will protect my bright moon divine hall. If we encounter any dangers along the way, I'll warn you, Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out from behind. After that, the bright moon divine hall immediately shrank to the size of a fist, which Jian Chen then grabbed in his hand. Ziying, Qing Sua, I'm going to the saint's world. Things can only be difficult for you for now, Jian Chen said to the sword spirits. Then he placed his hand gently on the twin swords. With a flash of light, the swords vanished, having merged into Jian Chen's palm. They remained in his dantian. Jian Chen already had the ability to store the twin swords in his body for quite some time now, except leaving the swords in contact with the world allowed them to absorb the yin and yang energies in the world, which was beneficial to their recovery. However, he could no longer afford to keep them exposed now that he was going to the saint's world. Jian Chen carried the bright moon divine hall in his left hand as he traveled alongside Shen Jian. They entered the tunnel together, leaving their original worlds. The tunnel to the saint's world was not composed of chaos but balls of multicolored hues. They formed long streaks of multicolored streams, filling every corner of the tunnel. At the same time, an extremely tremendous pressure crushed in from all directions. The pressure was so great that it could kill Saint Emperors. Only Origin Realm experts could withstand it. Jian Chen and Shen Jian endured the pressure easily, carefully making their way through the spatial tunnel. They looked around out of curiosity. When Jian Chen saw the multicolored hues that filled the tunnel, he immediately saw his landscape changing, varying between light and dark. Through the hues, he seemed to see worlds flash by blurrily. Each world was different. Each world possessed its own systems and cultures. Sometimes, he could even see the battle between experts of various levels in the worlds. Some were powerful, while others were weak. They could be as weak as sainthood experts, or even mortal realm experts, but he would also see battles between origin realm experts as well. However, the images were extremely blurry and changed exceptionally quickly. Each image would appear and disappear in a split second, making it impossible to discern whether they were actually real or not. What you see is all true because we're currently moving through space at an unbelievable speed. Every world we pass by projects a shadow, Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen was secretly shocked when he heard that. He had already seen the images of countless worlds. If each image represented an entire world, he truly had no idea just how many he had already passed. Although I already knew that there were extremely many lower worlds, now that I've truly witnessed how many there are, it's just indescribable. The Tian Yuan continent I stayed on in the past is only one of the images among all of these, Jian Chen thought. Jian Chen and Shen Jian completely lost the notion of time as they moved through the tunnel. They had no idea just how long they had been traveling for. Along the way, they would come across chaotic spatial streams, but they would avoid it safely. Finally, they saw the exit of the tunnel. There were barren plains, stretching as far as the eye could see. Apart from some huge birds that shot through the sky with lightning speed, there was not a single living thing to be seen. But at this moment, the space in the sky suddenly distorted violently. A huge space gate suddenly appeared, and two figures fell out from it, hitting the land heavily and kicking up a cloud of dust. Chapter 1667, The First Encounter with Godhood. The two people who fell out of the space gate were Jian Chen and Shen Jian. As the gravitational force and density of space were much, much greater than the Tian Yuan continent they were on before, they immediately felt like an extraordinarily heavy mountain had crashed down on them as soon as they emerged from the tunnel. It pushed them heavily into the floor as they were unprepared. Jian Chen stood up with a perfect flip. He brushed off the dust and soil on him while observing the foreign world. He could sense extremely powerful laws of the world in this world, which filled every inch of the surroundings. The origin energy here was so dense that it had exceeded anything Jian Chen could imagine. He would basically absorb a large quantity of it without any difficulty at all with every single breath. Compared to here, the world of Forsaken Saints seemed like a remote, lackluster village. Aside from this, what Jian Chen felt the most clearly was the increased gravity. It was more than a dozen times more powerful than on the Tianyuan continent, while the density of space had reached a stunning level as well. If the space of the Tianyuan continent and the world of Forsaken Saints were a thin layer of paper, space here would be like a steel plate. No, even describing it as a steel plate would be undermining the toughness of space here. It was many times tougher than steel. Is this the Saints' world? Jian Chen looked around and said excitedly. The abundance of origin energy in this world gave him hopes of breaking through with his chaotic body. The laws of the world are so powerful, origin energy is so dense, and even the gravity in space is so strong. This should be the Saints' world, Shen Jian said as he brushed off the dust on him. He raised his head to look around, and he too was excited. Let's find a remote place to enter seclusion fist. I need to break through to godhood as soon as possible. Only then will we have a better chance of surviving here, Shen Jian added. His strength had already reached the limits of reciprocity in the lower world. He had also comprehended the laws of the world, having been in possession of the key to godhood since quite some time ago. However, the laws of the world in the lower world prevented people from reaching godhood, so he immediately became quite eager to break through after arriving in the Saints' world. Sure. I can use that time to gain an even deeper understanding of the Saints' world from Fairy Haoyu, said Jian Chen. Then he started to fly away from their current location. With the increased gravitational force and density of space in the Saints' world, Jian Chen and Shen Jian's speed was significantly affected as a result. They could no longer cross millions or even tens of millions kilometers with a single step like before. Aside from that, their consumption of energy was several times more rapid as they flew, while the radius their souls could envelope was restricted as well. Jian Chen, I need to absorb origin energy to recover my body, so I won't be able to help you to do anything aside from informing you about the Saints' world. If you come across any enemies, you'll have to handle them yourself. Please remember to keep my Divine Hall safe. My Divine Hall had some uses on the Tianyuan continent, but in here, probably any reciprocity expert could smash through it. Fairy Haoyu's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. Fairy Haoyu, please don't worry. As long as I'm alive, I'll protect your Divine Hall with my life. I have quite a few people in there as well after all, smiled Jian Chen. With the strength of you and Shen Jian, you'll still be able to protect yourself against any godhood enemies. But your friends will be completely helpless against them, so for their safety, just let them stay in my Divine Hall for now, Fairy Haoyu said. Jian Chen and Shen Jian had no objections to such a suggestion, so they agreed happily. Jian Chen and Shen Jian flew through the barren plains at a steady pace, searching for a suitable place to enter secluded cultivation so Shen Jian could break through. There is people up ahead. Suddenly, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. Very far ahead from them, a small group composed of a little over 10 people had appeared. 1 reciprocity, 2 returnants, and 4 receival. The rest are all Saint Emperors, Shen Jian said calmly. A gleam of light flashed through his eyes, and he continued, they are the first cultivators we've seen on these plains after flying for half a day. Let's go ask them some things so we can understand the situation around here. Jian Chen nodded and changed direction with Shen Jian, directly flying towards the group of people. The group clearly noticed the two of them as well, so they became cautious. However, at this moment, Jian Chen's face changed. He came to a halt and said in a gruff voice, "Wait, there's a godhood expert hurrying over here." With that, Shen Jian sensed a powerful presence approach the area at a rapid pace. His face also changed. He stood beside Jian Chen cautiously. A few seconds later, a red figure shot over like a comet. He flew over from afar extremely quickly and seemed to be in a great hurry as if he was fleeing for his life. With his approach, a powerful pressure flooded the surroundings, as well as a powerful pulse of energy that was enough to cause the expressions of Jian Chen and Shen Jian to change. The figure did not seem to be hurrying towards Jian Chen and the small group before. He only seemed to be passing by and came across them coincidentally. However, when the fire-red figure discovered that there were other people up ahead, he suddenly changed directions and directly flew towards the small group of people. In the blink of an eye, he arrived before them. Flames roared around him as he hovered in the sky, looking just like a god of fire. However, his vicious wounds were clearly visible through the roaring flames, as well as his pale face and the residual blood at the corner of his lips. He was evidently injured. Be careful. That person's a late deity, Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out sternly. If she still possessed her strength from before, someone like that would only be as insignificant as an ant. However, she had to treat him cautiously now. Jian Chen and Shen Jian looked at each other. They had never thought that they would come across a godhood expert as soon as they arrived in the saints' world, and they would be so strong. You've appeared at the perfect time, you can help me heal. Undying body of flames. Suddenly, the fire-red figure bellowed out, and the flames around him surged, turning into a sea of fire that engulfed the small group up ahead. Facing the attack of the godhood expert, in particular, a late deity, it was impossible for the small group to resist. They could not even flee, so they were directly swallowed up by the sea fire and instantly vaporize. As they died, the fire devoured a portion of their life force and origin energy, becoming a part of the energy that healed the man. When the sea of fire vanished, the presence he gave off had palpably become much stronger. Jian Chen and Shen Jian became grim. They looked at each other and could sense that the situation was not great. As expected, the man surrounded in flames arrived before Jian Chen and Shen Jian after killing off the small group. Chapter 1668, Deity Lu Fei, it's actually a late reciprocity cultivator. Judging from your presence, you should have reached the limits of late reciprocity, but you haven't comprehended the laws of the world yet, so you're stuck at reciprocity. If you didn't appear here today and met me, you might be able to reach godhood one day in the future, but it's a pity that you'll never have that opportunity ever again. Become the nourishment to heal me. Remember my name, the name of the person who will take your lives, Lu Fei. The man in flames smiled viciously. He looked at Jian Chen and Shen Jian like they were already dead. Lu Fei, do you really think that you can handle us? We have no intentions of being your enemy, but if you insist, you can't blame us for being merciless, Jian Chen said coldly. Although he was grim, he showed no fear or fluster at all. Lu Fei's eyes narrowed, and he glared at Jian Chen. He sneered, you sure do talk big. Although I can't see your exact cultivation level, I can blurrily sense that you should be at reciprocity. Even if I'm wrong and you possess strength at godhood, you still can't change the situation. With that, killing intent exploded in Lu Fei's eyes. With a bellow, he used his undying body of flames again, and the flames on him immediately surged, rolling towards Jian Chen and Shen Jian as a sea of fire. A gleam of light flashed through Shen Jian and Jian Chen's eyes. With the crisp thrum of a sword, a dark sword appeared in Shen Jian's hand silently. He fused with the sword, charging into the sea of flames as a resplendent streak of light, killing his way towards Lu Fei as if he were unstoppable. Jian Chen's gaze sharpened as if he had become a drawn sword, filled with sharpness. At that moment, he seemed to have become a sword himself, even though there was not one in his hands. His finger swept past the space before him gently, and an invisible sword chi immediately split the sea of flames that surged over rapidly. Shen Jian had fused with the sword, becoming an extremely powerful and resplendent streak of light. He flew along the path that Jian Chen had opened up as his cloud stream sword directly stabbed towards Lu Fei's forehead with a dazzling glow. You've actually comprehended the laws. I've underestimated you. Lu Fei's eyes narrowed, and he immediately became rather stern. He clenched his hand, and the sea of flames in the surroundings surged, forming a palm of fire instantly. Not only did the palm of fire give off a powerful pulse of energy enough to surprise Jian Chen and Shen Jian, but it also grabbed Shen Jian's sword with a sliver of the laws of fire. You've reached the limits of reciprocity and comprehended the laws of the world. If you had some more time, you would be able to reach godhood at any time, but it's just a pity that you'll never get that opportunity again. Even if you ignore the difference in cultivation, the difference between our comprehension is insurmountable as well, Lu Fei sighed gently. He looked at Shen Jian and Jian Chen in pity, but the pity quickly transformed into a cold killing intent. To him, both Jian Chen and Shen Jian would become nourishment to heal his wounds. Lu Fei extended a finger gently and a red light shot from its tip. It traveled towards the center of Shen Jian's forehead with the laws of fire. Formbreaker. Suddenly, Shen Jian bellowed out, and the cloud stream sword immediately exploded with light. He slashed towards the beam of light. The attack contained a mysterious power that could destroy everything in the world, specifically targeting anything with a form. As he slashed out, Lu Fei's palm of fire was immediately cut in half. The laws of fire in the palm clashed with Shen Jian's laws of the sword and was actually suppressed, limiting the strength it could display. Afterwards, the cloud stream sword became a blur and stabbed the beam of red light containing the laws of fire. With a boom, the red light immediately shattered, expanding into the surroundings as powerful ripples of energy. The ripples of energy blew Shen Jian backwards. Although he possessed battle prowess at godhood, he was still a long way away from Lu Fei in terms of cultivation. On the other hand, Lu Fei paid no attention to the ripple of energy. The energy struck his body and failed to move him at all. He stared fixedly at Shen Jian as disbelief flooded his face. Your comprehension of laws is actually greater than mine. Impossible, this is impossible, Lu Fei cried out as his heart began to surge. He was a late deity and was quite close to becoming a god, yet someone who had not even reached godhood had actually surpassed his comprehension in terms of laws. He struggled to accept this. But at this moment, a feeling of coldness suddenly rose up in Lu Fei's heart. He saw Jian Chen arrived before him with lightning speed. His fingers formed a sword, emitting a beam of light that was just as long as a standard sword from his fingers. He stabbed it coldly and mercilessly towards Lu Fei. Lu Fei's face changed. He had not sensed any power from Jian Chen as Jian Chen had never moved against him. Only after they began fighting did he discover in shock that Jian Chen was actually much more powerful than Shen Jian. He felt a strong sense of threat from Jian Chen's attack. Lu Fei finally became grim. No longer willing to be careless, he struck out as hard as he could. A fire-red sword appeared in his hand and his laws of fire condensed. He stabbed out with all his strength. The sword Qi Jian Chen condensed collided with Lu Fei's sword. Sword Qi and sparks shot off in all directions. Lu Fei's laws of fire and Jian Chen's laws of the sword collided and the laws of fire became suppressed. They dispersed rapidly. He was not Jian Chen's opponent in terms of comprehension. Impossible. How can your laws be stronger as well? It's also greater than mine. Who are the two of you? Lu Fei was shocked. He had lost all composure. He had never thought that he would come across two people so powerful on these simple plains. Their cultivation was clearly not very great, but their comprehension of laws was frightening. Even he, a late deity, could not rival them. Jian Chen did not respond. His gaze remained cold, and he stabbed out a second time at extremely fast speed. The sword Qi had already arrived before Lu Fei, directly targeting Lu Fei's forehead. Lu Fei shot backwards and swiveled his head to the side, barely dodging the fatal attack. However, the sword Qi had cut off some of his hair. Apart from shock, his gaze towards Jian Chen and Shen Jian now possessed a certain coldness. Then he formed a series of hand seals and the origin energy in the surroundings immediately surged over, condensing into a sword of fire that was 300 meters long. It dyed the surroundings red and clouds of fire seemed to condense high in the air. Since I can't directly devour you, I'll kill you and devour you afterwards. Once I devour the two of you, I should be able to recover by quite a lot. Truth Tier Battle Skill, Python Sword of Scarlet Flames. Lu Fei bellowed out, and the sword chi above him immediately turned into a streak of red light, shooting towards Jian Chen. The tip of the sword chi had turned into the vicious head of a snake. At that moment, Jian Chen had actually forced Lu Fei to use a battle skill as a powerful late deity. The battle skill was extremely powerful, having reached the same level as the immortal tier from the immortal's world. It made Jian Chen turn grim. Daluo Sword. Jian Chen bellowed out and formed a seal with his hands. He shone with golden light and a golden sword chi condensed from nowhere. It shot towards Lu Fei's Truth Tier battle skill. With the increase in Jian Chen's chaotic body, the Daluo sword he used right now was much more powerful than when he used it on the Tianyuan continent. He had used an immortal tier sword technique to deal with Lu Fei's battle skill that was at a corresponding level in the Saint's world, the Truth Tier. With a boom, the Daluo sword collided viciously with the Python Sword of Scarlet Flames. The golden and red light interweaved, creating a resplendent display of light. Lu Fei's Truth Tier battle skill began to disperse, while Jian Chen's Daluo sword was reduced to half a meter in length. It shot across the sky as a golden streak of light and penetrated Lu Fei's chest under his gaze of disbelief. Lu Fei's body shuddered, and blood spurted from his mouth. He staggered a few dozen meters backwards before stabilizing himself. With a flash of black, Shen Jian's Cloudstream sword shot over as well, slashing across Lu Fei's neck. It almost beheaded Lu Fei. Lu Fei became even paler, and the flame around him dulled in color. Not only did he fail to devour Jian Chen and Shen Jian to recover, but he had also sustained heavy wounds in their battle. He had bitten off more than he could chew. I never thought that I'm not the opponent of the two of them. If this continues, I'll definitely be defeated. I'll struggle to flee even if the ancestor of the Lu family arrives. I have to flee. Whatever, I'll remember the two of them for now and make them pay some other day. Lu Fei no longer wanted to fight anymore. With a single moment, he turned into a blur and fled as quickly as he could. Lu Fei fled extremely quickly. Neither Jian Chen or Shen Jian could match his flying speed. After all, there was still a disparity between their cultivation levels. A gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes as he watched Lu Fei flee. He formed a seal with both hands before turning into a bolt of lightning. He pursued Lu Fei at an unbelievable speed. It was the linear lightning release. That's impossible. His speed, Lu Fei was utterly shocked when he saw Jian Chen race over like a bolt of lightning. This time, he no longer had any time to dodge. Jian Chen passed through his body with lightning speed. Jian Chen would not have been able to catch up to Lu Fei with just flight, but he also knew sword techniques. The linear lightning release was a sword technique with extraordinary speed. It could be used as both an offensive measure and a way to chase others down. Lu Fei's eyes widened, and disbelief flooded his face. However, the light in his eyes faded rapidly, and they became glassy. Afterwards, his body split into two right down the center. Not only had the bolt of lightning split his body into two when it passed through him, but it had also obliterated his soul. I never thought that I could kill a late deity so easily after my chaotic body reached the 9th layer. Not to mention, because of my chaotic Niden state, I can only use 80% of my strength. Jian Chen sighed in amazement inside as he looked at Lu Fei's corpse. He took Lu Fei's space ring and said, however, this Lu Fei was injured. If he were at his peak condition, killing him would not have been so easy. Chapter 1669, A battle against a god. Shen Jian flew over from afar and said as he stared at Lu Fei's corpse, experts really are as common as the clouds in the saints' world. Just this single person we came across accidentally was a late deity. If he progressed a little more in his cultivation, he would have become a god. I need to find a safe place to break through as soon as possible. Shen Jian became even more impatient to break through to godhood after the battle with Lu Fei. However, there was nowhere to hide from sight on the barren plains, and they would encounter people from time to time. Clearly, this was not a good place to break through. Jian Chen thought of the Inata Tower. The Inata Tower was damaged, but it was a good place to break through. However, Jian Chen did not dare to take it out after arriving in the saints' world as he feared that extremely powerful people would sense its presence. Let's leave here quickly. This Lu Fei seemed to be fleeing for his life earlier. With his wounds, someone must have been chasing him. We can't stay here for long, Jian Chen said to Shen Jian. He played around with the space ring that he had taken from Lu Fei, before putting it away. Now was not the time to check through its contents. However, just when Jian Chen said these words, an extremely powerful presence arrived from afar. It blanketed the surroundings and surged into the sky, kicking up gales and causing the clouds to churn. The presence contained both rage and icy cold killing intent. Let's go. The expressions of Jian Chen and Shen Jian changed. Without any hesitation, they immediately flew off into the distance as fast as possible. The owner of the presence pressured them several times more than Lu Fei. He was an extremely powerful expert, having surpassed deity. Without a single thought, Jian Chen and Shen Jian were certain that he was the person pursuing Lu Fei. Lu Fei was already dead, but just in case, the two of them still chose to leave the area. A few seconds after Jian Chen and Shen Jian left the scene, a blurry, gray figure shot over from afar. He moved so quickly that he was several times faster than Lu Fei. He radiated with a powerful presence, so great that the ground beneath him sank. His icy, heavy killing intent reduced all the withered grass on the plains to dust. Very soon, the gray figure arrived before Lu Fei's corpse. Only then did his appearance become visible. He was an old man who seemed to be past his 70s. He wore gray robes, while his gray hair drifted in the wind behind. He was hawk-nosed, and his deep eyes were sharp. They shone brightly, while his face was terrifyingly sunken. The old man stared at Lu Fei's corpse for a while. When he discovered that Lu Fei's space ring had actually vanished, his gaze immediately became extremely terrifying. His killing intent rose rapidly until it peaked. It's impossible for you to steal the treasure of my Lu family. The gray-robed old man's face was extremely sunken as he spoke icily. He immediately expanded his soul and found the traces left behind by Jian Chen and Shen Jian when they fled a while ago. He immediately shot off in pursuit as a gray blur. The laws were powerful, and the space was tough in the saints' world. Let alone origin realm experts, even godhood experts with extremely great mastery over the laws of space would not be able to create a space gate. As a result, the old man could only fly despite his strength. Jian Chen and Shen Jian also discovered the old man's pursuit. The two of them were not even as fast as Lu Fei, so it was impossible for them to escape from the old man who moved several times faster than Lu Fei. They directly stopped and hovered in the sky, waiting for the old man's arrival. Very soon, the old man appeared before Jian Chen and Shen Jian. He directly stood in their way. His face was sunken, and he said coldly, "Did you kill Lu Fei? We were only passing by earlier, and we came across Lu Fei accidentally. He wanted to devour the two of us. As he was injured, he failed to devour the two of us in the end and was killed instead. May I ask for your name, senior?" Jian Chen clasped his fist and said without any particular modesty or haughtiness. "Jian Chen, this person is an early god. You have to be careful." Fairy Hao Yu's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head, causing Jian Chen to become even more stern. Although early gods were only a single cultivation level higher than late deities, the difference between the cultivation levels was extraordinarily large. Shen Jian also became extremely stern. He could tell that the old man probably would not let them go from how he behaved and reacted. They could not avoid battle. You came across him accidentally? Ha ha ha, what a perfectly timed accident. Lu Fei is one of my Lu family's 6 great godhood experts, as well as one of my elders. It's a pity that a mysterious organization successfully bribed him, so he betrayed the family. He even obtained a powerful formation disc to trap me, and then he snuck into our forbidden grounds to take the treasure of my Lu family. Yet, when I broke free and pursued him here, he just happened to be slain by the 2 of you. The treasure he stole must have ended up in your hands. You describe this all as an accident. Do you really think that I'm as easily tricked as a child? The old man laughed aloud. His gaze towards Jian Chen and Shen Jian became even colder, and he roared out, "Speak, who sent you?" "Senior, Lu Fei was indeed slain by us, but we have no connections to the organization behind him at all. I've spoken the truth. Whether you believe it or not is up to you," Jian Chen said emotionlessly. He knew that the old man had already mistaken their accidental encounter with Lu Fei and Lu Fei's death. In the old man's eyes, killing Lu Fei was just an act of silencing someone. "Humph, and you still want to twist the truth? As one of my grandsons, no one understands Lu Fei's strength better than me. How could he have been killed so easily by the 2 of you as a late deity? Not to mention, one of you is still at reciprocity. If I've guessed correctly, you 2 must have been sent by the organization behind Lu Fei to receive him, and they've only sent people below godhood to avoid raising attention, as well as to catch Lu Fei off guard. You then used the trump card you obtained from the organization supporting you to deal a sneak attack to Lu Fei, killing him. That way, you will succeed in both obtaining my family's treasure and silencing others. That way, you don't have to worry about me working out the organization supporting you through any remaining traces. Am I right?" The old man's voice became even more frigid. Killing intent surged from him like a flood, becoming extremely dense. The more he analyzed the situation, the more correct he felt his conjecture was. Although he had seen traces of the battle earlier, he refused to believe that Jian Chen and Shen Jian could kill Lu Fei with just their strength. Instead, he believed that it was due to a treasure they had obtained from the organization supporting them. "Speak, what is the organization's behind the 2 of you? I might spare your lives if you tell me, but if you don't, I can only take you back with me and torture you in all kinds of ways until you confess." The old man approached Jian Chen and Shen Jian slowly as he radiated with an extremely powerful pressure, squashing down on Jian Chen and Shen Jian. Now that the situation has developed to a point like this, there's no point in talking anymore. "Do it," Jian Chen said to Shen Jian through a communication technique. He formed a seal with his hand, and he immediately shone with golden light. A massive, golden sword chi condensed in a single moment, shooting towards the old man. Jian Chen did not dare to hold back at all against a god. He used his full strength right from the start, using the immortal tier sword technique, the Daluo sword. Chapter 1670, Corruption. At the same time, Shen Jian's presence changed abruptly. His hair danced and his clothes ruffled despite the absence of wind. He radiated with an extremely powerful sword chi. As he slowly raised the cloud stream sword in his hand, he immediately began to glimmer with starlight. At that moment, the space around the cloud stream sword seemed to have transformed into an endless starry sky. Will that splits the heavens, the sword shakes and stars shatter. Shen Jian suddenly bellowed out. The cloud stream sword was swung forwards as it shook violently. As the sword moved, a visible ripple rushed towards the grey-robed old man destructively. It moved extremely quickly. Wherever the ripple passed by, the ground cracked, and dust was kicked into the air. The dead grass all turned to powder. A will that splits the heavens was the strongest sword technique Shen Jian had learned so far. The attack possessed the power to destroy planets in the lower world. However, everything in the Saint's world was much tougher than the Tianyuan continent, so his devastating sword technique failed to cause a lot of severe damage in the Saint's world. So the two of you have comprehended laws. I've underestimated you before, but now, you're done for. The gray-robed old man was at ease and did not treat Jian Chen and Shen Jian with any caution at all. With a wave of his sleeve, the origin energy in the surroundings immediately began to surge, instantly condensing into two powerful strands of sword qi. They shot towards Jian Chen and Shen Jian respectively with roaring flames. Boom! Jian Chen's Daluo sword was directly dispersed by the old man's sword qi, erupting with powerful ripples of energy. It knocked Jian Chen back in a constant retreat. At the same time, the ripples from Shen Jian's attack came in contact with the old man's sword qi. The ripples immediately began to distort violently, before dispersing at a rapid rate. The old man had nullified the terrifying ripples that could easily destroy planets in a lower world just like that. At the same time, after tearing through the ripples, the old man's sword qi did not disperse. It only became much weaker than before. It then continued without slowing down at all, traveling towards Shen Jian as a streak of red light. Formbreaker. Shen Jian became extremely stern. After bellowing out, the cloud stream sword shone with dazzling white light, landing on the sword qi as a blur. Boom! The old man's sword qi finally dispersed, exploding mid-air as scarlet flames. Meanwhile, Shen Jian was blown backwards as blood spurted from his mouth. The difference in their strength was just too significant. One was at the peak of reciprocity, while the other was a god. Even with Shen Jian's extraordinary talent, he was unable to make up for this gaping disparity. Jian Chen was in no position to care for Shen Jian. He became unprecedentedly stern, and he maintained a hand seal. A golden sword qi immediately condensed, and he continued his attack against the old man with the Daluo sword. At the same time, his other hand did not just sit around idly either. It also formed a hand seal. You better use all your trump cards. Just this isn't enough to threaten me, the old man said coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, he destroyed Jian Chen's Daluo sword without any effort at all. It was also at this moment that Jian Chen suddenly began to shine with dazzling white light. He seemed to have transformed into a bolt of light, shooting towards the old man with unbelievable speed. He arrived before the old man in a single moment. The old man's eyes narrowed abruptly. At that moment, Jian Chen had even reached speeds beyond what his eyes could see. He only managed to capture a blur with his soul. This speed, the old man was shocked. The speed Jian Chen displayed was just too fast in that moment, fast to the point where he found it to be rather unbelievable. He was still several hundred meters away one moment ago, yet he seemed to have teleported before him in the next moment. It had caught him slightly off guard. Spurt. The sword qi condensed at the tip of Jian Chen's finger stabbed into the old man, but it was met with an extremely great resistance, preventing it from going any further. The tremendous energy in the old man's body had stopped the penetration of Jian Chen's sword qi as soon as possible. At the same time, the old man's palm landed heavily on Jian Chen's chest. Jian Chen immediately paled and a mist of blood spurted out from his mouth. He shot backwards like a broken kite. The old man's attack had reduced his clothes to dust. However, Jian Chen did not weaken at all after being injured. Instead, his battle intent became even more substantial. There was a vague craziness within his sharp eyes. As his hand seals changed, he suddenly came to a halt. At that moment, all the energy within him was pushed to the maximum, and the laws of the sword condensed around him. He began to advance, using his body as a sword of laws to tear through all obstructions in the world. He charged towards the old man as if he were unstoppable. Tai sword technique. The old man's face was extremely dark. With a cold snort, a red sword appeared in his hand. The sword danced and immediately turned into dragon of flames as he charged towards Jian Chen with a bellow. The craziness in Jian Chen's eyes became even more intense, and a few specks of red light flickered. With his body as a sword, he seemed to have become a streak of light as he charged at the dragon of flames. With a boom, the dragon of flames immediately erupted, reduced to energy ripples that shook up the surroundings. Jian Chen let out a few more mouthfuls of blood, but he continued towards the old man without slowing down at all. "I sure have underestimated you," the old man said coldly. His sword trembled and he stabbed out 3 times with lightning speed. Each stab left behind a terrifying wound on Jian Chen's body. The third stab, in particular, pierced Jian Chen's right shoulder, almost chopping off his right arm altogether. Jian Chen's right hand seemed to have become a sharp sword, stabbing into the old man's chest. His fingers emerged from the old man's back, covered in the blood of a god. The old man grunted, and his gaze towards Jian Chen finally became slightly stern. Jolting his body as hard as he could, he knocked Jian Chen far away. Afterwards, he left behind an afterimage with a single movement and caught up with Jian Chen instantly. He stabbed out with lightning speed with his fire-red sword, directly towards Jian Chen's forehead. Shen Jian's face changed at the sight of that. He immediately wanted to charge over to stop the old man. However, at this moment, a presence filled with evilness and destruction erupted from Jian Chen's body. His pupils had completely become blood-red at that moment, while his head full of long hair began to redden at a visible rate as well. Jian Chen's sudden transformation caused the old man's eyes to narrow. He felt cold from the bottom of his heart due to Jian Chen's evil and destructive presence, as well as a sliver of uneasiness. Shen Jian's face changed as well, staring at Jian Chen in disbelief. He actually sensed the presence of the crisis of the world from Jian Chen. What is this presence? The old man was surprised, and he could not help but slow down his stab towards Jian Chen. However, before long, his gaze turned cold, and his sword immediately turned into a streak of red light, continuing along the same trajectory as before. Chapter 1671, Might of the Profound Sword Qi. At that crucial moment, 2 resplendent balls of light emerged from Jian Chen, one azure and one violet. They turned into 2 swords that shot towards the old man. Ding! The twin swords collided heavily against the old man's red sword. There was the screeching of metal as residual sword qi was sent flying off in all directions. When it struck the tough ground, it left behind deep holes. The twin swords retreated right after the clash, arriving above Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen gripped the Ziying sword, and his head full of red hair began to dance despite the lack of wind. His red pupils stared at the grey-robed old man emotionlessly. He had completely lost his mind and himself in that moment, only leaving behind an instinctive desire for destruction and slaughter. He had also gripped the Ziying sword out of instinct. Shen Jian stood from afar as he stared fixedly at Jian Chen. He became extremely stern because he could no longer sense any familiarity from Jian Chen at all. There was only a sense of unfamiliarity. He had almost thought that Jian Chen had become the crisis of the world because Jian Chen just felt too similar to the crisis of the world right now. Jian Chen. Shen Jian bellowed out thunderously in an attempt to wake Jian Chen from his corrupted state. He had already guessed that something probably went wrong when he was cultivating in the blood-red cloud. However, Jian Chen did not respond at all. It was like he did not hear Shen Jian's call at all. At the same time, the voices of the sword spirits rang out in Jian Chen's head. They were frantic as they tried to awaken him, but they also failed. Suddenly, there was a flash of red light that shot towards Jian Chen with a ball of intense flames. The old man wielded his fire-red sword, and his presence surged. He directly charged towards Jian Chen with heavy killing intent. At the same time, the corrupted Jian Chen moved as well. He turned into a red blur and began to clash with the old man. Even though Jian Chen had lost his mind after being corrupted, where only the instincts for destruction and slaughter remained, he had become even more powerful than before. Violet and azure sword chi shook up the surrounding space within the flames, wreaking havoc in the surroundings by spreading as powerful ripples of energy. The ground sank, and dust was kicked into the air, causing the region where they fought to become hazy. For that period of time, Jian Chen actually managed to fight against the early god on equal grounds, having been corrupted and using the twin swords. The great disparity in their strength had been made up all of a sudden. Jian Chen also used various sword techniques one after another. He used the Daluo sword, Tai sword technique, and linear lightning release several times. He had not regained his consciousness and instead used the sword techniques completely out of his instincts. Jian Chen and the old man became more and more injured. Both of them were covered in blood, but they fought even more intensely as time went on. However, at a closer glance, there were several times more wounds on Jian Chen than the old man. He had clearly lost the upper hand. However, the greatness of the chaotic body was fully demonstrated at that moment. Even after losing his mind, his chaotic body's superior regeneration remained, so his wounds actually healed at a visible rate. However, the rate of regeneration was nowhere as fast as the rate at which he was injured. The old man narrowed his eyes at the sight of this. He became extremely shocked. What is this cultivation method? It's so amazing. Not only can it allow deities to fight against gods, but just the regeneration is so powerful as well. If I obtained this cultivation method, thinking this, a sliver of greed immediately appeared in the old man's eyes. Although he knew that there would be downsides to the cultivation method, he could accept and work with some disadvantages, given that his strength could skyrocket. For that moment, the old man began to fight even fiercer. In just a few clashes, Jian Chen gained a few more terrifying wounds. In the end, the old man even used his hand to grab the two swords while he used a truth-tier battle skill with his left hand. He created a colossal hand that pressed against Jian Chen's chest gently, but the move contained a destructive might. Truth-tier battle skills used by gods possessed extraordinary power. With a heavy boom, Jian Chen's chest exploded. The terrifying power from the truth-tier battle skill wreaked havoc wildly in his body. Not only did it destroy all his organs, but all his bones also turned to dust as well. He was extremely heavily injured. Jian Chen spurted blood from his mouth as he collapsed far away. His entire skeleton had been turned into dust, so he could no longer stand up. He lay on the ground powerlessly. But unexpectedly, his consciousness actually began to return gradually after suffering the extremely heavy wound. The redness in his eyes gradually vanished, and his blood-red hair began to turn black again. Very soon, Jian Chen's mind returned. He returned to normal, but when he sensed his wounds, he could not help but smile bitterly. He could not even stand. He had no idea how long it had been since he had been injured so heavily. If he did not cultivate the chaotic body, he probably would have been reduced to mincemeat the moment the old man's truth-tier battle skill struck him. His soul would have been wiped out. The old man dripped with blood as he arrived before Jian Chen step by step. He reached towards Jian Chen, planning to take Jian Chen back with him to the Lu family and slowly get Jian Chen's cultivation method from him. Shen Jian gritted his teeth when he saw Jian Chen's dangerous situation. He began to cast the second move of a will that splits the heavens, regardless of the consequences. He had used the second move once against the crisis of the world. That time, he had paid an extremely heavy price to use it, but he had no other choices left in the current situation. A will that splits the heavens, you mere reciprocity cultivator, piss off. However, before Shen Jian could use the second move, the old man directly sent a sword chi towards him that pierced his body. Shen Jian was immediately knocked backwards as he vomited blood. He had become pale. The old man did not even glance at Shen Jian. His attention was completely fixated on Jian Chen. He directly reached towards Jian Chen excitedly. Just as the old man was about to grab him, a cold light suddenly flickered through Jian Chen's eyes. All of a sudden, a dazzling white light began to radiate from Jian Chen. A strand of white sword qi that was only the size of a finger had appeared above his head. It seemed tiny and underwhelming, but the wind and clouds in the surroundings immediately began to churn as soon as it appeared. The originally calm origin energy became violent at that moment as well. Wild streams of energy wreaked havoc high in the sky. Even the power of laws that was basically present everywhere became slightly disorderly. What is that? The old man's hand came to a halt. He stared at the tiny sword qi hovering quietly above Jian Chen's head. He felt a frightening power from the sword qi that was only the size of a finger. The sword qi was so great that it was enough to destroy him. Before the old man could think too much about it, the finger-sized sword qi shot towards him as a streak of white light. The moment it shot off, the air seemed to freeze and time seemed to arrive at a standstill as well. Everything in the world fell silent. Only the sword qi was present, becoming the only existence in the world as its radiance replaced the sun. It shot forwards as it destroyed any origin energy in its way and cleaved through the laws of the world. Even though the old man was a god, he was just unable to dodge the sword qi. He immediately pulled out several discs from his space ring. Each formation disc was a rather powerful defensive treasure as they enveloped him with screens of light. However, the treasures seemed to become extremely fragile when the profound sword qi struck them. They turned to dust silently, and then the profound sword qi passed through the old man's body. The old man's presence withered rapidly as blood constantly spurted from his mouth. He became sheet white. Not only did he suffer extremely heavy wounds the moment the profound sword qi passed through his body, but it had also severed a part of his vital essences, his cultivation, as well as a part of his soul. A huge, gaping hole had appeared in the old man's chest. The flesh and blood that belonged to the area had vanished entirely. It was a horrific sight. The old man stared at Jian Chen in shock. He forcefully endured the weakness he experienced as well as the stabbing pain from his soul. Without any hesitation, he took out a formation disc from his space ring and threw it at his feet. He fled with a flash of white light. He had no choice but to flee. The wounds from the profound sword qi were just too heavy. Even though he had managed to keep his life intact, he no longer had any more strength to fight. In particular, the stabbing pain from his soul even made him feel like he would faint at any time. He had become as weak as a mortal at that moment. Only death awaited him if he did not flee. Chapter 1672, Falling unconscious. Jian Chen lay on the ground powerlessly. His face was completely pale, and he was currently extremely weak. The profound sword qi was very powerful, but using it was not an easy matter for him. At that moment, he felt like all the power of his soul had been drained away. He felt a strong sense of drowsiness, as well as some pain from his head. Even his consciousness had blurred. He could lose consciousness at any time. Using the profound sword qi drained the power of his soul. If he had used the profound sword qi in his peak condition, the power of his soul would not have been completely drained, but the prior battle had taken a certain toll on the power of his soul, especially since he was in a corrupted state. As a result, when he used the profound sword qi towards the end, he had almost run out of the power of his soul. Jian Chen's consciousness blurred as he stared in direction in which the old man had fled. Finally, he could no longer endure it, and darkness descended. He had fallen unconscious. To another side, Shen Jian struggled to his feet. He took out a jade bottle from his space ring and opened its lid, pouring a few recovery pills into his mouth. Then he staggered to Jian Chen's side and fed him some of the pills. Next, he carried Jian Chen and flew away in a tottering fashion. Shen Jian had no idea if any more godhood experts would come in pursuit from the Lu family. Now that Jian Chen had fallen unconscious, and he was heavily injured, the two of them might end up dying here if more trouble arrived. As a result, he carried Jian Chen and left the region as quickly as he could. Shen Jian's wounds healed extremely gradually. He was just too heavily injured, and since a god had injured him, his recovery was even more difficult. Even the medicine only managed to stop his condition from worsening. Red light still flickered on his wounds. The red light was the residual power from Old Man's laws of fire when he injured Shen Jian. The power of laws was something even beyond origin energy. It was the representation of godhood. If the power of laws had injured any regular origin realm expert, it would have been fatal. However, as Shen Jian had also grasped the power of laws, and his comprehension of the laws was no less than the old man's laws of fire did not pose as great of a threat as initially imagined. In fact, under the suppression of Shen Jian's law of the sword, the residual power was unable to harm him anymore. It was just that he was in a hurry to run right now, so he did not have the power to deal with the laws of fire. He could only keep it suppressed for now. Shen Jian lowered his head to look at Jian Chen, who he carried under his arm. When he discovered that the power from the laws of fire in Jian Chen's wounds was gradually fading, he immediately became both surprised and envious. He sighed in amazement, "I really do wonder what kind of cultivation method you practice that gives you such a powerful body and regeneration. You're able to waste away the laws of fire just with your body's regeneration." This wasn't the first time Shen Jian had praised Jian Chen's chaotic body. Back when he was still slightly weaker than Xiongzhong, Jian Chen had managed to repel Xiongzhong with his tough body and otherworldly regeneration rate. Afterwards, during the battle between him and Jian Chen where they split the moon in half, he was clearly stronger than Jian Chen, yet Jian Chen managed to hold his ground against him with the chaotic body, resulting in injuries to both of them in the end. Yet now, the toughness and regeneration of his chaotic body had matched up to how quickly the residual laws of fire could cause damage. He had even used the regeneration of his body to wear out the power from the laws of fire. Shen Jian fled with Jian Chen. Darkness descended and dawn broke again. After a day and night of flying, even Shen Jian no longer had any idea just how much distance he had crossed. He only knew that he had made his way out of the barren plains. Traveling in the Saints' world was much more difficult than on the Tianyuan continent. Not only was one's speed limited, but it would also take up a great deal of energy as well. Shen Jian struggled to support himself anymore after the great battle and subsequently fleeing for so long with his heavy wounds. In the end, he stopped by the side of a small lake. "I have to cleanse the residual powers of the laws of fire from my wounds, or they won't heal." Shen Jian collapsed on the ground as he breathed heavily. He no longer had the power to travel. He immediately closed his eyes and used the power of the laws of the sword to purge the laws of fire from his wounds. The laws of fire were not Shen Jian's opponent as they had lost their source. Very soon, they were completely purged, while Shen Jian's consciousness faded after purging the laws of fire as well. He fell unconscious. Before long, the whistling of wind suddenly rang out in the sky. A treasure made for flight flew over. It was 300 meters long. There were several dozen black-clothed men on the vehicle who observed the surroundings. They stood there like guards. Every single one of them gave off quite a powerful presence. They were actually all of the origin realm. At the very front of the vehicle were two women in luxurious clothes. They were as beautiful as goddesses, enough to outshine all the flowers in the world. However, from their appearance and gazes, it was quite evident that one of them was mature and steady-minded, while the other was mischievous and childish. "Sister Shiyu, there's still one more day before we get back to the Mo clan. It has been quite a few years since I've seen father. I sure do miss him. I want to return as soon as possible. I wonder if he'll like the gift I've prepared for him, the childish woman said crisply. There was sense of yearning on her face. The woman who had been referred to as Xiu smiled. She said, "Father loves you so much, so how can he dislike the gift you've spent so much time and effort to prepare for him? Though, Mo Yen, the young master of the Automo's sword sect, proposed marriage with you a few years ago. What do you think of it?" "Humph, I never want to be a couple with that young master. Sister Xiu, you have no idea. I hate him. He makes me feel uncomfortable all over whenever I see him. I'll refuse with my life if you want me to become a couple with him." Mou frowned as she pouted. She revealed a sliver of uncontainable disgust, and the young master of the Automo's sword sect was mentioned. Now that the Liu family and Ando clan are getting closer and closer, it'll be bad for us if we don't forge alliances ourselves. Father agrees to your marriage with the young master because he wants to rope them in. After all, they also have a god, Xiu sighed gently. She was filled with helplessness. I don't care. I simply refuse to marry that young master, Mo Yen snorted gently. She was headstrong. Suddenly, Mo Yan's eyes narrowed. Staring at the ground below, she said, "Sister Mou, look. There are 2 injured people there. I can sense that they're still alive. Let's go and help them. Look at how they're all covered in blood. They're so pitiful." Mo Yen could not bear the sight, and her eyes became filled with some pity and sympathy. Xiu glanced down calmly, but she did nothing. Instead, she said to Mo Yen, "Have you forgotten what I said before again? There are fights and deaths everywhere in the saints' world. The ties between people, whether good or bad, are never as simple as you imagine them to be. If you travel around the saints' world in the future, you'll see things like this even more often. It's not that you shouldn't save people, but there are just some people who won't show any gratitude for you saving them at all and will even stab you in the back when the opportunity arises. There are some people who might even bring trouble to you and the clan if you save them." Mo Yen clung onto Xiu's arm and said like a spoilt child, "Okay, I get it. But Sister Xiu, they really look so pitiful. They're bleeding so much, and it's not safe out there. If they lay there, they'll definitely be eaten by some beasts. Let's help them. At most, we can leave after they've recovered. Not to mention, weren't you saved from outside by Father as well?" Xiu poked Mo Yan's forehead heavily and said, "You're hopeless, but that was an exception." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.